most compelling part of this work is how do we equip them to thrive in that rapidly changing and very complex world.
Accepting and valuing those who are different from us is at the core of global empathy.
Global empathy was something big that I learned from Columbus North International High School. It's a school where there's literally represents over 20 different countries. So many different languages are spoken at that school.
And it's very normal for me to see a kid say, hola, and then ni hao. I think that's one of the most beautiful things. We don't feel different, we feel unique. The difference is it became an asset. It's not like something we have to hide.
Columbus City Schools, I think, as an organization, really allows for an unprecedented level of multicultural exposure, more than our surrounding district counterparts. We are so diverse here.
We serve lots of economic levels, so it's a multifaceted district.
And our kids see things differently. They're incredibly diverse, right? Much more acceptance of people who aren't like them, whether it be sexual orientation or race or gender identity.
If you haven't guessed by now, we see our diversity as one of our biggest strengths.
In order for us to fully realize that as a strength, we also have to be curious about one another's perspectives, life experiences, and the assets they bring to the table.
You should be there for your fellow human. And I think that it's important to teach kids that as young as we can.
I like my friends because they share. And by my friends is I don't want to make them angry or sad. I just want to cheer them up and make them happy.
Different people doesn't mean different things. Like, say a person is lighter than you. What does that mean?
You meet so many new people, different people. You get to know all these different cultures because you meet friends from countries you've never even heard from.
The world is bigger than just ourselves.
If you think of the world as all just one skin color, one religion, one culture, it's gonna be more boring because you're not gonna understand how other people feel.
The ability to be able to disagree and to be able to articulate your opinions and perspectives without being, confrontational necessarily, but also listening to one another.
Accepting and valuing those who are different from us is at the core of global empathy. It's about taking action to celebrate and protect our differences.
They are our leaders right now. They are pushing us to be better and to think better as grown-ups. And that's exactly what we need and what we're looking for.
The death of George Floyd, added an additional layer that we have kind of swept under the rug for a long time, and that's around inequity and racism.
Our students were a vital part of helping our entire community know that there were things that we just can't tolerate as citizens. And we want our students to be change agents, and they really showed us that they could be. And I think we're very proud of that as a district, to know that our students are willing and able to stand up for the things that they know are right.
This is the place where I live too. We always want to make the world a better place, so why not start now instead of waiting until it's too late?
We have to continue to march, continue to protest, continue to converse.
Good evening, everyone. I am calling our October 4th regular business meeting of the Columbus Board of Education to order. Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
President Adair.
Present.
Ms. Beckerly. Present. Mr. Brown. Here. Mr. Cole. He is on his way, as I understand.
Yes.
Dr. Pierce. Vice President Reyes.
Here.
And Ms. Vera.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. On this evening's agenda, we do not have anyone here speaking on agenda items. We are expecting a report from our superintendent, no report from our internal auditor or treasurer. We have a few items in board matters. We have a section of notice of public hearing on reemployment of retired employees. We have our consent agenda. We have one speaker on non-agenda items. We will have an executive session this evening, and then we will come back to adjourn from this room. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing no objections, our agenda has been adopted. All right, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our superintendent.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Adair, and good evening, everyone. Tonight, my team is here to provide an operations update, and this would include information regarding safety and security, school HVAC projects, and transportation. But first, I'd like to share some exciting news about Pathway Express. We launched Pathway Express last year as a reimagined Saturday academy. And backed by popular demand, we have 4 all-new destinations for students and families to explore. Our students will once again have an opportunity to sharpen their skills through immersed hands-on lessons while also experiencing some of our city's top family-friendly sites. Activities kick off this month with free admission every weekend at the Ohio History Center. Our Pathway Express Family and Community Resource Day also returns on Sunday, October 9th from 1 to 4 p.m. The event will feature a meet and greet with New York Times bestseller author Tammy Charles, coat giveaways for students, All Hallows Eve ticket giveaway while supplies last, and resources and support from our family engagement team and local partners. All families who register and participate during October will also be entered into a drawing. Winners will receive a 1-year family membership to museums for all and a surprise for their students' school. We will head to a new location each quarter leading up to the 2023 summer experience. Students and their families will explore wild lights at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, the Ohio State Capitol Building, and the Franklin Park Conservatory. And all this while honing their portrait of a graduate attributes, with each event having corresponding themes of adaptability, communication, creativity, critical thinking, global empathy, and technology. I am confident that this year's partnership and experiences will be just as fun, educational, and unforgettable as last year. And families can learn more about the Pathway Express by visiting our website. And I am looking forward to seeing our students and families there, especially this Sunday, October 9th at 1 o'clock. And I'm sure the board members should please join me in meeting some of our families there. Exciting opportunity. Now, I will turn it over to the Deputy Superintendent, Dr. David James, for tonight's operations update.
Good evening, President Adair, Vice President Reyes, members of the board. 3 updates tonight. The first one will be for safety and security, and we'll have Chris Baker come up and run through that update.
President Adair, Vice President Reyes, other members of the board, Superintendent Dixon, Dr. James. A quick update on our safety and security. Some of our data that we've already received for the first part of this school year in our first 5 weeks. This data is specific related to all incidents that have occurred up through Wednesday, September the 28th. We've had 172 major incidents as we describe as part of our calculations and our collections. From those incidents, and I will share more of that in the next slide, out of those incidents, only 2 of our students were transported based on their behaviors and their involvement to the Juvenile Detention Center in Franklin County. We had 8 other students who were transferred to outside resources due to non-accident incidents, but specific to health-related transports, such as mental health and things of that nature, okay? Next slide. So total incidents by school level. So some of the total that we're talking about in major incidents are specific to our fights, assaults, drug and alcohol being brought into our schools, and other incidents such as threats, weapons of those natures are what we are calculating at this time. Fights are our #1 category at this time for our first 5 weeks of school. So if you look at the presentation, you'll see our high school students are leading the charge here with 48 fights, and then followed by our 7th through 12 students. Assaults are our next highest incidents by category with 14, drugs and alcohol with 5, and our other incidents were 17, calculated for a total of 84 under the high school. And if you look at that, you'll see how it fluctuates down by each class level, by grade, by school, with a total of 172. We do not at this time have any data to compare from the beginning of last school year to see where we are as it relates to that, so this is just the data for this current school year. Next slide. So again, if you look at that, our high school levels are leading our charge with our fights at 48, and then you'll see our middle schools at 34. Our elementary schools are in there as well, 7 through 12 with 6, and our K through 8 students are at 1 incident so far through the school year. And these are calculated information, only things that occurred on our school property. I know you'll see a lot of information that is sent up to you for things that occurred right outside of the school, in the streets, in that neighborhood, but we're not calculating that data because it is not occurring on the school property, okay? Next. Assault by school level. Again, our high school students are leading the charge. We have 14 total assaults. For the high school students, middle school, we have 12, elementary school, 4, K through 8, 3, and 7 through 12. At some of our other schools, there was only 1 incident there for a grand total of 34. Next. So now we'll talk about our staffing. Our staffing for school year 22-23, we have a total of 139 general funded positions. We also have an additional 32 ESSER positions that were granted to us, and at this point we have 124 of those positions totally filled. We have a total of 47 vacancies at this time, which 6 of them are in our ESSER positions and 4 specifically to our safety and security staff, and they're going through some background checks, so hopefully within the next week or so we will have all of those positions filled. 2 of those ESSER positions are our accident investigators, and we're going through that process with the civil service testing and get the appropriate candidates to fill those positions. Next. Our metal detector screening. So what we're doing right now is I'm continuing to work, we are working with our general counsel to look at our current administrative guideline policy that was created in April of 22. To look at some revisions that may be needed as we're looking to further implement this newer process as we go further into the school year. We want to make sure that we are in line with all laws, regulations, and privacy acts as we're working through this. As we're also implementing this, we want to make sure that we're taking the appropriate measures and the time to evaluate these processes and the systems. What we're doing with that is we're continuing to evaluate what our policy says and our current actions to see that we are in compliance and make those appropriate adjustments as needed. Right now, since the beginning of our school year, we started doing other drills, but on the 19th, the week of the 19th, we actually began bringing our metal detectors into our high schools and doing random screening for those schools. One per week is what we've done so far. We're utilizing our building administrators, our team, to go over to those schools. And as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, we are still working out some of those logistics to help expedite that process to still assure that we're going through everything that we need to do to assure the safe entry of those kids, as well as to expedite that process so that they can go to the cafeteria, grab their breakfast, as well as attend first period on time. So there are some things that we're still looking at. We'll continue to do that procedure right now. We have ordered the 60 metal detectors that have been approved by the board. We're working with that manufacturer to get the products available to us and delivered to us as soon as they can. We have been working with them as far early as today to work out some timelines, but there were some logistical things that had to be adjusted. So as soon as they arrive, we will be getting those devices sent to our high schools, assembled, and be prepared to utilize them at their school. What that does for us, allows us the reduction of moving the single units that we have now to each school. So they'll be at the schools ready and available for us to utilize when we call on that school for that morning entry process. One of the things that we are doing, we have another vendor who has graciously, so if some of you have probably been to lower.com and you've seen some of those other type metal screenings. So they're similar to these screens devices here. So they're going to come out to one of our schools and allow us to really see the effective nature of how it worked for us. What this does for us, it will give us an opportunity to do a cost analysis of the product as well as the number of staff and resources that we will need to effectively manage that process. So luckily we have a company who's going to come out and give us the opportunity to really look at it, and then we'll do some cost analysis as far as continuing to evaluate that process to see what is in the best interest for us for expedient entry into the school, as well as safely identifying any weapons or things that are brought into the school. We do have the ability to adjust that process and see what it is we're really trying to capture. But for right now, we want to see how it will actually work for us in our system. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Superintendent, do you want to do questions at the end of each one so we don't have to bring them back up? You want to do that? Is that
yes,
okay?
Please, thank you.
All right. Questions. Board Member Beckerly.
I didn't see on the list, the data, which I appreciated. I think the data is great because now we have a baseline, and we hopefully will be able to compare that as we go forward. I don't know if we do it on a weekly basis or something, so that we hopefully will see.
Yes.
But either way, we need to have a sense of what's happening, and are we improving or aren't we improving?
So one of the things that we're doing now is we're calculating that data from Thursday through Wednesday, and that gives us an opportunity to look it over before I forward that information to
Sure.
Superintendent Dixon.
And I think it's in the report.
It's in the weekly report.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that was actually, I allowed myself to get off on a tangent. I was just going to say that data is in the weekly report, and that's important.
Yeah.
What I am interested in knowing, I guess maybe this is a better way to say it, is where our students, staff, family are now. And this might not be a safety and security thing. This might be a wellness thing, but some sort of a survey. How are you feeling safely? How safe do you feel? And then a pre and post is what I'm looking for with the metal detectors, because there's a certain let's make sure that they're having the effect, A, of reducing the number of weapons in the building, and B, making people feel safer. And I don't know whether that might not be your concern necessarily, Mr. Baker, but I just want to make sure we're paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
And are the families feeling better? Mm-hmm. Are they feeling worse? Because some families might be like, I hate my kid going, like the cost, but and so I just want to make sure we're paying attention to that data on a building by building basis.
Mm-hmm. So you're right. So one option is we can do some customization of our panorama data.
Yeah, that's what I was
Right.
hoping
Mhm.
for, that we wouldn't have to
That-
recreate the wheel.
Right, but some of the specific questions we may know, that's where the customization come in, and we have to add some of those questions.
Terrific.
And then we also talked about exploring just some quick questions, a survey that we can get to students.
Yeah, how
You
you
know,
feeling now? How
you
were
feeling
you
now?
feeling?
Mhm.
How are you feeling?
That can be a little, that can give us a little temperature that'd be separate from the panorama. But we can customize the panorama surveys to meet that need.
Thanks.
Vice President Reyes.
Thank you so much for your report. When we look at the PowerPoint, it talks about incidents. When you're talking about the panoramic data, I guess it's important for us to know whether that an incident is one person, two people, is it an incident, and how you desegregate that data. As we all know, some of the things that are going on. As we look at solutions, some of these are going to be crowd control solutions, some of these are going to be individual solutions, some of these are going to be staff solutions, some of these might be community solutions. So just wondering, as we gather the data, how we report that out, and or at least how we gather it. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have to include all of this in the report. And I know that Board Member Beckerly talked about guns in schools. I don't see that technically on your slides. So I don't know. I'm assuming that that is also in the data. It's not really a question, I guess. Just kind of wondering about, especially the incident piece, because I don't know if this is 48 fights involving 10 people per fight, one person per fight.
Yes. Yes, Vice President Reyes. So one of the things I was talking with my staff today is we have to dive deeper into the data that we're gathering. And we're looking to move forward into getting more detailed, specific, the number of kids, the day of the week, the time of day, so that we can identify these trends and then deploy our resources accordingly. If it's happening every day on a Wednesday in the cafeteria, we need to deploy our resources there and make everyone aware, here's what the data is telling us, here's what the kids are telling us, and we need to staff that appropriately. So as we get into it and gather that data, we dive into it and then we roll it out and say, here's what the data is telling us, and now let's do the proper actions to hopefully resolve this and reduce these incidents in those specific time frames at that time. And again, not disregarding those other issues, but let's dive into the ones that are definitely making it available to us. So that's one of the things I did speak with our staff today, that we have to get deeper into gathering data, as well as the number of kids that are involved in these assaults. Is it a one-on-one fight, or is it one-on-one that began to be a two-on-one type of fight? So there's a lot more that we can do with the data. But again, once we collect it, what's the resolution to the back end of it?
And as you, thank you for that. And as you look at the data, will you also be tracking, like, if there's other organizations in the building? So a lot of studies state that if there's an adult presence or there's more adults in the building, that may decrease, because it's very interesting that K through 8 is 1, 7 through 12 is 6. So something either is going on right, or it's just what the schools are, or maybe we have more city year people there, or we have more X number of adults in the building, so that may deter some of these incidents from occurring.
Note taken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, with your last point, Vice President, I mean, the thing is, we don't have the same number of schools in each of those categories, so the
Right.
data will always be skewed down because there's fewer K-12, K-8, and K-6 as well.
Right, but K-8 has a lot of, but K-8 has a lot of students compared to maybe some of our high schools. I mean, I'm just
Well,
looking,
yeah, maybe
there's
there's-
never going to be apples to apples, I
No, it
think,
won't
to
be.
your point. But there may be, I'm hoping that there's a reason why.
Maybe we can get a rate of incidents per student count or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how could we? There's got to be a way, Russ, wherever Russ is, data to compare this a little bit closer.
I'm just wondering, like, when they're looking at solutions, because I'm assuming we're not gathering data just for the sake of gathering data and saying, hey, we're gathering data so we can look at solutions. One of them I'm wondering is maybe it's down in some schools, perhaps because there's more adults there. Are there intervention things that are going on? Are there particular programs? Maybe there's more sports or more band or more art or more, some of those things that are helping our students de-stress. Then possibly those are the things that we may need as a solution when we're coming in and saying, hey, maybe we need to do more of X because we show that in these schools that have these things, there's lower incidence. But possibly, obviously, we're going to have probably 100 hypotheses and 100 pilots to see what is actually working.
Board Member Vera.
So, Mr. Baker, really quick, I want to be able to understand how exactly is our data collected in terms of who, if there's a fight that breaks out, is safety and security filling out some kind of report for you? Is it the principal that's filling it out daily? Because I feel like these numbers, even though they seem a little low to me, just based on what I know we are also receiving. So I'm curious how much are we really capturing everything that's happening? Because if there's, a lot is happening that day, is there a time frame that these incidents have to be reported to you so that you have kind of like active information?
Yes, thank you, Board Member Vera. So one of the things that we are finding out as we move forward, we have 2 data collection sources, which again to me is a problem. We have Infinite Campus, which the school administrators are putting that information, and then we have the information, and the information that I present to you, and I apologize for not saying it on the front end, the information I'm providing to you is the information that is called into our base operations at 17th Avenue.
So this is called in?
Yes, these are the incidents that are called in. We also have the database with Infinite Campus that the school administration is putting into data. So hopefully as we move forward, and we talked about our staffing, one of the vacancies that we have in our office is a data analyst. So hopefully when we get that position filled, we'll be able to have one sole source that will be able to tie all this together, that we're getting one collective data source of information that is factual and not, segregated from calling in the base versus calling it in as the school administration does it. So that will help us moving forward.
Okay. And are you able to, so what exactly is your protocol for that, though, in terms of if there's a fight that happened today at 2 o'clock, how long as a team member in that building do I have to report that to you?
So I don't want to give the exact time frame, but once they get the situations under control and they get their documentation together, they report that in to the base operation who collects that data. And if they get a phone call, a lot of times you'll see they'll immediately tell myself or the assistant director, and we'll send that information up as the rest of the data is being collected, analyzed, and evaluated for, hopefully to get the factual information on paper.
Okay. And then my other question is in regards to our elementary school population. I guess I'm curious on your thoughts in terms of our security strategy as a whole. I know oftentimes we worry more so about our high schools, but I feel like we're seeing a lot more activity on the elementary school level. Are we thinking about the same strategy for our high school kids as we do our elementary? Or I guess I haven't really seen a lot of attention specific to what we are seeing in the elementary buildings.
Yes, and with that increase, we have our staff right now who have satellite elementary schools. They're specifically assigned to that high school, but they'll have a satellite elementary school that they also go to and report. But as we fill our table of organization, our goal is to have someone in that school to build those relationships with those students as well, to help reduce and mitigate some of those situations that could be filtering, that we don't have that extra set of eyes or that human factor there to help address that situation. So that is one of our goals moving forward as we fill our vacancies.
Okay, thank you for that. And then one quick question. I know earlier on you mentioned kind of what we quantify for like fights, for example. Do we count or track fights that happen during our games? So like our football games, is that part of this data or is that something separate?
I'm not 100% sure if that was part of this report.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then my last and final question. So for our students who are in fact, bringing weapons to school, what is our process when those kids are caught? I know we contact the authorities, but are those kids then like, what is the disciplinary process? Do they get to return to those buildings? What exactly is our process once a kid has been found with a weapon in our building?
So I'll answer the part that I'm basically familiar. Once CPD arrives and they're starting an active investigation, their final outcome is what it is, and that's why we have 2 of those students that I listed here were transported out to JDC. The rest of that process is handled within the school administration on that timeline and those other disciplinary actions that take place. I do not have the exact outcomes of that, but I know it's at the building level administration who handles the rest of that protocol.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Klein, I saw you turned your camera on. Did you want to jump in?
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. To Board Member Vera's question, those are handled by the principal or assistant principal, and those students, if they had a loaded gun, would be referred to the hearing office for an expulsion. And so they go through a process that allows us to give them due process, but treat them in a fair way.
So, Dr. Klein, if I may, if they brought a knife, for example, to school, is that something considered differently? Do they get multiple, I guess, could they be on this chart more than one time for reoffending, I guess is my question. If it's not a loaded gun, but it is a pocket knife, per se, like how is that differently handled?
Sure. To Board Member Vera's question, it is handled according to our student code of conduct, and we use the level of infraction that's appropriate for the particular incident. So each of the principals would use their matrix and determine what the level of infraction was prior to the suspension or prior to the actual expulsion or the hearing. Remember, every student is entitled to due process, so due process would be given first.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Klein. I guess that's just one of the things I have a question about. Just if we are saying no weapons, and that is our collective rule of no weapons, how many times does a student get to essentially bring a weapon to school before we say we really meant no weapons the first couple times? So that's just kind of what I've been thinking about, because I've been seeing the different reports of weapons that are being brought, and I'm just wondering if they are handled the same. I understand the due process part of it, but I guess I'm just wondering, could a kid reoffend a few different times with different weapons of choice? And how are we handling that differently, I guess is what I was trying to understand. Thank you.
Board Member Vera, just to clarify, it depends on the length of the knife. It also depends on what they did with it. For example, if a student just brought a knife to school because they had it in their backpack and they were saying that they were defending someone on the way home, that is different than if someone takes out a knife and threatens someone.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Klein.
Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much for this report. I just have a couple of probably deeper dive clarifying questions. While I appreciate our commitment to gain and retrieve quantitative data, I think a lot is going to be stated from our students, our community, and our staff on a qualitative level, the narrative. And so when we are conducting our panorama surveys, can we ensure that we're providing the opportunity for open-ended responses? One. Can we ensure that the questions provide students to lean in and give ideas around solutions that can actually be implemented? So again, while I think there is value in surveying, sometimes we survey knowing that individuals' ideas and suggestions won't really be followed through with. And so I think in this particular instance, we need to be very intentional around the questions that we're asking and why we're asking those questions, and that they're questions that we can actually take action on. And then I also wondered, what are we really doing to deal with the culture and climate in our buildings? I think Vice President Reyes brought up, are we looking to see how many community partners are there? I think aside from quantitatively counting how many community partners are there, are we really doing like an analysis to understand what type of program they're doing and how that's affecting
the outcomes that we're seeing in the building. Are we doing any of that currently, or is that in the works?
Yes, so part of it is, we talked about, Dr. Chapman kind of talked a little bit in the last meeting about all the schools and their school improvement plans, that culture and climate is one of those areas that every building is focused on. And so some buildings are using those incentives for good behaviors. We have restorative practices that we have. We had a group of teachers that we trained this summer with AJ actually helped. So we are moving forward with restorative practices and making sure that students have those opportunities to talk and about what's happening in the building with an adult who really understands and are listening. So we have those practices. And then we're using a lot of the panorama survey data. So we're making sure that we're collecting that data and utilizing that data to on a district level, but also building specific. And also our building principals are working with their students and teachers just to kind of assess some of the culture and climate issues that may be very different by building.
Because I guess the trend that I'm noticing in the reports that are coming to us is showing a heightened incidences of students bringing weapons and fighting. And so I think our strategy around it needs to change. And maybe the community partners that are coming in while we have this restorative justice and this academic focus really needs to start dealing with, here are the consequences for if you are caught with a level 4 weapon, you know, and if you do make a threat, this is how it will affect your life moving forward. Like maybe we need to bring in some community members.
That's a good point. One of the things that we learned in the spring when we were doing some of our security checks, we found that students were asking for, we had our amnesty tables and we were telling the students, these are the items, do you have any items that will be confiscated? And they were putting those items on the table. But at the end of the school day, they were asking if they can have those items back for when they walk home. So one of the bigger issues, to your point, that how can we make sure that it is safe when our students are walking to and from school, especially when the daylight savings time comes. We want to make sure that students, if they feel they need to have a weapon, it is because it's a neighborhood issue, not necessarily a school issue. So having some community partners to help and address and have those conversations, I think, to your point, are needed.
And then my last question is just, are there any updates on how we are rolling out the introduction of the metal detector units into our schools?
So we don't have an update now. We're still working on that as we get closer to, as Mr. Baker stated, we're still testing the one item that will be forthcoming. And just want to make sure we get the right protocol and the right language so that when we are implementing this with families, we're going to use the family ambassadors as part of that protocol and just making sure that we have the right language so really everyone understands what we're doing and the why.
Well, I guess there's one final question. Is there anything that the board can do collectively or individually to assist with the trends that we're seeing in terms of our students not feeling safe and creating safe buildings and communities around our schools?
I know one of the things that the board that you have continued to do is support the purchase of additional staff members. You have allowed us to use ESSER dollars in that way. You have allowed us to purchase metal detectors and wands, programming for the restorative practices. All of those programs geared to not only make sure that our students are able to capture the data that our students are feeling safe, and then our recent partnership with Castle. And that's at SEL. That is going to be a big part to make sure that we're addressing. We have a district strategy around social emotional learning. So I believe that the board has continued. I think once we get the language of what the implementation of our plan, I think socializing that in the community conversations would be helpful too. When the board have their community meetings, that's going to be important that that's socialized from the board and from everyone throughout the district.
Thank you.
Remember Brown.
Can I add to, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
And I was going to add to what Superintendent Dixon stated, and it's important to understand that the metal detector is just a unit by itself, but we have to have the proper amount of resources there to man that. We can put it there, leave it there all day. If there's no one there to detect what's coming in, it's kind of a waste of money. So we have to really analyze this and make sure we're determining how many staff members we need on the front end to go along with the amnesty boxes and say, hey, we're doing this today. This is your free shot. You know, you get out of jail free card today, put it over here, and we still have to evaluate that. And what we're doing right now is we're really analyzing the actual number of resources that we need to do it. We've done a few schools. We've seen the pictures. I'm not sure, we haven't shared the photos, but if I'm a student right now and I woke up to the school and I see everybody outside, I know what's going on. They're doing security checks. I'm discarding my whatever. So we have to get to a point where we have the right resources so that we can properly move this along, that we're not causing delays, we're not backing up the lines. Parents are dropping off their kids wondering what is going on. That'll be part of the information sharing. But it's important that we continue to get the support to have the amount of resources necessary, whichever process we roll with, to be able to effectively manage this entrance process. So that's, I would add with what Superintendent Dixon says. That's very important that we have that support, continued support.
And this is safety and security is the additional supports that we're talking about.
Yes. Because right now the building administrators are helping, with communication with the students as they're coming through, but having the right amount of safety and security staff to help facilitate the entrance of the students in the mornings. So once we get to a point where we have all the metal detectors in place and we want this to be a daily process, the current staffing levels that we have now, we can't do that and effectively still have students in the rest of the school building, checking on what's going on in the back, in the gymnasium, in the cafeteria. So we still need additional resources to have everything that we need manned.
Can teachers help? I mean, because
So one of the things that teachers do, though, in many buildings, they're standing out in front of the doors. So when you're providing that warm and welcoming climate, when students are coming in, they're greeting them, they're saying hello. That's one of the things that they're doing in all of the buildings. Those that are on cafeteria duty, resource, or recess, they're out there just kind of talking and building those relationships with kids. But when it comes to an incident and we think that, they suspect something, they're the ones that are telling the principals and the security officers what they suspect may be happening.
So our teachers can't really help with the process. They're just reporting potential infractions.
I'll safely answer this. We haven't asked our teachers to make this part of their daily duties. We've had teachers who volunteered to assist and monitor it, but as far as us saying, hey, this is a job responsibility for today, that has not come from our office. We've had the school administrators actively involved. We've had some teachers at some schools who want to assist, but not being told this is a job responsibility that they have. Again, some of them have come out to be the welcoming, come on, let's do this. But as far as our role as the safety office, we're trying to take that on in communication and collaboration with the school administration.
I would, with my colleagues, entertain a strategy around incorporating using our teachers to help with this process, compensating them for this additional work that they're doing, and ensuring that they get the opportunity to not just kind of share if there's an infraction potentially happening, but that they can also be the one that can issue, whether it's a level 1, 2, or 3. Like they can take action to document the infraction that has actually occurred. So it's not just the principal or the assistant principal, if that makes sense. So if we could entertain that, because again, teachers are a key and vital role.
Member Brown.
Thank you. First, just briefly with respect to what Dr. Pierce just had to say, I think obviously that kind of consideration would require sitting down and talking with our partners, CEA and OPSI, and it need not be just teachers, but staff otherwise, and I don't know the extent to which that may be doable. My question partly follows on Ramona's thoughts about adults in the buildings and our partners and that kind of thing. But as we do gather information for security, gather information in the panorama surveys, and we need to make sure that those two things are not siloed.
Right.
But we also want to make sure that we get data not just from students, but from our teachers and staff. And I don't know the extent to which they're already included and surveyed, but we need to make sure we get all of that.
Yeah, agreed. And they're part of the panoramic survey.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Mm-hmm. That's part of the customization.
Okay.
We can make this.
Thank you.
My question on the data is more, I think, for Russ around the goals and guardrails, because attendance is a huge part of a lot of our strategies. And obviously, if students do not feel safe or they're suspended or whatever, I'm just wondering if there's any. Are we looking at the data together? Are we looking at high incidents of schools or situations with students that have a high need versus the attendance versus the strategy outcome for our goals and guardrails? That's just more of a, I don't know if this is yet part of that conversation, but again, this goes back to that Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
We are not going to get kids to come to school if they do not have their basic needs met. So this would be one of those. So I'm just wondering if that's part of any of the strategies or conversations that you guys are having. You don't have to answer that right now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. James?
Next up is Alex Trevino, Director of our Office of Capital Improvements, to give an HVAC update.
Good evening, President Adair, Vice President Reyes, members of the board. I'm going to attempt to do this paper free today with my Surface, so forgive me 1 second. So I'm going to first give you an update on our current HVAC projects. These first 2 slides are just presented in alphabetical order. So you'll see on this first slide, not a huge amount of change from what you saw previously. So obviously last time we reported updates, we were very focused on air conditioning. At this point, we're getting much more focused on heat and making sure we're ready for the return of cold temperatures, which we're already seeing overnight. So at Broadway Elementary, all spaces are still fully air conditioned. We're anticipating having full heat in the building by the end of this week, so by Friday. And I will just say for many of these sites that are reporting that we'll expect heat either by Friday or this Sunday, we are working with Columbia Gas on getting gas pressure increases. So just the kind of change of systems that we have has required some increases to those natural gas pressures, especially for first thing in the morning, so when all the units fire at the same time to bring those building temperatures up, just so all that equipment can run. So no major technical issues, just working with our partners there to get that adjustment made. At Coleraine, all spaces have air conditioning. Again, we'll have heat fully operational by the end of this week. We'll still remain on that temporary chiller, although we're going to need much, much less of it here as time goes on until the new one arrives roughly the middle of this month. At Como Elementary, all spaces again have air conditioning. All spaces will have heat by this coming Sunday. At Mays Elementary, all spaces with the exception of the administrative areas have operational air conditioning, with that heat again expected to be operational by Sunday. And just to give you a little more information on those admin areas, so these admin areas are operated with our technology that we call VRF, or variable refrigerant. So it's basically a heat pump system. So when they have their permanent air conditioning, they will also have their permanent heat. So we will remain on temporary systems until those, what we would typically think of as the air conditioning units, but in this case, heat pumps, arrive roughly the middle of the month. At North Linden Elementary, all systems are fully operational. The same is true for Westmore Middle School, and it may come as no surprise that those two projects were managed by the same vendor, which is why you see the same status there. Our Walden facility has fully operational air conditioning, all heating expected to be operational by Sunday. And again, it's the same exception, so it's tied in with that last group of buildings where those admin areas are waiting on those condensers that should arrive the middle of the month. And then that takes us to Valley View, West Broad, and Westgate, and these three buildings are all managed by the same vendor, so you're gonna see very similar updates there too. So Valley View is still running on its existing heating and ventilation system. We've been working through some issues with American Electric Power on some power issues there that we expect to have resolved here this week, and then we'll have that space fully heated and air conditioned by the end of this week. At West Broad Elementary, all air conditioning is fully functional. Again, heat fully operational by Friday. And the same update for Westgate Elementary School. So that takes us to our projects that have been our most challenging this year. And so you'll notice that up at the top, I call them out by phase. So these are our phase 12 projects. They're managed by our partner, Johnson Controls Incorporated. And so a little bit different update at each of the sites. So Fairwood is probably the one that has been the most behind schedule. So we are still running on our existing ventilation systems at that site. We have had the vendor return the boilers, so that existing heating system back to operation. I've been working closely with our maintenance team so that when we would typically fire boilers, the building will be back on its original heating system, so we don't anticipate any operational issues there. We just will not be running on our new systems. So I finished up this report at the tail end of last week, but I can confirm that the last of the equipment was installed this weekend as it reports there over October 1st. We are still disappointed that in spite of that equipment being installed, the electrical systems are not installed. So while we have brand new equipment sitting on the roof, it is not yet operational. And right now we are still waiting on a recovery schedule from that vendor on when they'll have that work complete so those systems can be operational. The vendor is reporting to us, so the original completion date, which is behind schedule, was September 30th. They're now reporting to us they expect to have it complete by the end of this month, October 31st. And I will tell you, we are concerned whether we think they'll be able to meet that date or not. I'll take this point to take a brief pause and give you some general background information on this contract too before I give you the nitty-gritty on Johnson Park in Yorktown. So we have moved forward. So we've been working with our legal counsel, mostly outside counsel, on best steps for us to take to get performance out of this vendor and to see these projects through to completion. We did move forward with filing a bond claim, which is a pretty unusual measure to take. We've stepped up our own internal manpower and the amount of presence that we have on this site, both planned and unplanned. My team tries to make sure we're on these buildings multiple times a week, if we can every day, just to see what's going on, make sure we can report on progress. We've also agreed to pay our criteria engineer who supports us, certainly on the technical side as well. So you'll see an amendment come into their contract that we've negotiated with the bonding company for additional presence from their team. We've also seen the bonding company, which in this case is Liberty Mutual, provide their own manpower. So they actually have their own engineering team who is in contact with us almost daily, has largely taken control over the management of the project. And so I want to make sure you understand it's incredibly disappointing for us as well. And yet I think we're doing everything we can to make sure we get to a successful conclusion of these projects. And so with that, I will give you the updates on Johnson Park. So approximately 85% of that building is running on its new air conditioning system, and about 15% is still running on those existing ventilation systems. The vendor's reporting they'll have all systems air conditioned by the end of this week on Friday. All systems will be operational with heat by Friday as well. And so that overall completion date has slid from originally September 12th to this Friday. Much more plausible on this site, but we're also concerned whether we think all of those spaces will be fully operational. We don't have a lot of concern with classrooms because those spaces are mostly finished at this point. It's going to be the gymnasium, auditorium, cafeteria, library spaces that we have the most concern with. And not a significantly different update on Yorktown, where about 60% of the building is operating with air conditioning, and that really reflects classrooms for the most part. The other 40% are still running on their existing systems. And the same update where the vendor is reporting, so I take that back, it's 1 week different from Johnson Park. So they're reporting all spaces will have air conditioning by this Friday. All spaces would have their permanent heat by a week from that date. And then a slide from that total completion date from September 12th until October 14th. I don't know if it'll make more sense, so I've got 3 more slides that'll give you the secondary update that was requested at the last meeting, which is to kind of go through those HVAC projects that are still outstanding that we intend to complete over the next 3 years. But I feel like maybe this is a good time to ask if there's any questions specific to current project updates.
Making any recommendations on how we should move forward with future LEDE processes, our bidding, our contracts, how that works based upon this vendor?
Yeah, so Board Member Pierce, a couple of questions there. I'm gonna answer the LEDE one first. So I don't know what this company's LEDE participation total is going to be. We can certainly look at what they committed to up front. I believe it's 20% or more. You know, we'll usually look at the contracts afterwards and see how our contractors have performed. Certainly, if there's performance issues with any of our LEDE vendors, we'd want to look into that, but that's no different, frankly, from any vendor. I'll choose my words carefully on the first part. So there's obviously a long trail of concerns expressed. We implemented, I think, at the start of our Operation Fix-It projects that we have a pretty comprehensive evaluation process that we perform internally. We also ask our engineering, in this case, or our consultant partner to fill out as well, looking at our vendors so that we've got a good paper trail of performance that we would certainly use towards our responsive and responsible evaluation, or in this case, to look at a best value selection. So I don't know that I'm prepared to make any statements about the evaluation because we've not completed it at this point, but certainly we'll take a good amount of time to make sure that we provide a very reflective evaluation of the performance of this vendor. And yes, we would certainly look at that in terms of any recommendation we'd bring to you in the future about whether to hire this company or not.
We would greatly appreciate that. I think as Board Member Brown and Vera and I meet and go through our LED process and our contract process, I think that would be important to know. So we would greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Other questions on the current projects?
All right, so as we kind of look ahead, so these 3 slides represent the spaces within all of our academic facilities that are not currently air conditioned. And so you'll notice that there are only 2 buildings here that are elementary buildings. And you'll see the first one is Hubbard Elementary School, and it is already under contract. So you approved that contract roughly a month ago. So I'm still reflecting it as incomplete work, although it's already scheduled for summer of 2023. The only other building that's elementary on that list is Moeller, and you might remember that that is kind of the anomaly of our schools and facilities where we have an elementary school that is really in a middle school facility. And so that's why it has a separate gym and auditorium that don't have air conditioning. But so we put them on the list. The rest of them on this page are our middle schools. So you'll see Buckeye Middle School, Boys Middle School, Hiltonia all have both a gym and auditorium that still need air conditioning. Our Columbus Gifted Academy, Sherwood Middle School, and Woodward Park have just a gymnasium that needs air conditioning. And then I've kind of put Mifflin Middle School in its own category. So this is a building where the current auditorium and about 50% of the classrooms are already air conditioned, although those systems are well beyond their anticipated useful life and are not operating well at all at this point. So we're working right now on plans to overhaul those systems. The current gym is not air conditioned. And then because of the capacity and the enrollment in this building and also its place in the facility master plan, we'll have to take another look at how much investment we make in this facility in terms of how much air conditioning. Like, the basic question is, do we need air conditioning in all of the classrooms? Like, do we use all the classrooms? So that'll take a deeper dive before we'd make a recommendation on the investment to make it that facility. And then the other two slides, just because they didn't all fit on one, are the high schools. And so you'll see here, I'll go in reverse order. So you've got Whetstone High School and Walnut Ridge High School that need both a gym and auditorium. And those are paired with Centennial. I'm going to skip Cause for now. Eastmore Academy, Marion Franklin, and Northland. So those sites all need air conditioning at both their gym and auditorium space. Much like Hubbard, I put Cause in its own category just because while it needs full air conditioning for the whole facility, you have already awarded that contract. We're already working with our partner there, Corner-Cocosing, on that work. It is scheduled to occur over summer of 2023. And then at our Beechcroft, Briggs, Independence, and Mifflin High School, we have only a gymnasium in those facilities that are currently not air conditioned and that we'll put into our work plan. And that concludes my update for you today.
Questions on the upcoming projects? Okay, we'll start with Board Member Cole, Beckerly, then Pierce.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple of clarifying questions. When you say existing systems, outside of what one would think of being the obvious, operating or inoperative HVAC, what else entails existing systems? Windows, what are the things that comprise existing systems?
So Board Member Cole, just to be clear, we're talking about Mifflin Middle School, correct?
It could be Mifflin Middle School, it could be any school.
So at least at this point, Board Member Cole, we are only looking at those systems that are responsible for heating, ventilating, and air conditioning those spaces. Now, separate to that is the life cycle renewal plans. And so that is kind of one of the lenses that we're taking, is that we are going to do our best. We are at a pretty significant deficit right now in terms of condition of facilities. And so we've got a lot of makeup work to do, but we are going to try our best to not run projects in the same building in consecutive years. So in other words, we're going to try to minimize the disruption so we can do things like summer school and not have contractors and buildings at the same time. Will we be successful in every occasion? Probably not. But we're going to do our best to try to consolidate projects so that buildings might have a project that's bigger for 1 year, and then maybe we take a couple years off. And so we kind of take a more round-robin approach. So that's one piece to the puzzle. The other piece, and I'll use Mifflin Middle School as the example because it is perhaps our most complex and worst condition building simultaneously. So anybody who knows the history of that building, and I don't know it firsthand, so hopefully I get it correctly, but it was originally a township school. It was also originally the township high school for Mifflin. I think it has no fewer than about 7 additions, all kind of pieced together. And so you can imagine when it was built, starting back in the 20s, it did not have air conditioning. And so it has an original heating system, which is still in operation. It has some distributed ventilation. It has some central ventilation. It has some central air conditioning. I'll admit, much to my surprise, the 1970s edition are all air conditioned, not surprising. But when they air conditioned the 70s edition, they also came back into the older part of the building and ducted and central air conditioned portions of the building. I'm not saying that I think it's been operating or operating well for quite some time, but the infrastructure is there. So our hope is that at a relatively modest price point, we can overhaul that system, because I don't want to recommend that you make a 20-year investment in a building that we should bulldoze at the first opportunity. But we also need to make staff and students comfortable. And so that is the balancing act that we find ourselves trying to make. I don't want to try to explain to anybody, you or our voters, why we're going to make a bigger investment at a facility than we absolutely need to. But we've got a complex system that we'll need to work through, and it will probably require a maintenance team to make more investment to keep it operational in the short term. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. The other question I have is, what internal, well, here's the first one before I get to that one. The first one is how are we incorporating our custodians into these conversations, into these planning for systems maintenance, for systems upkeep, for systems transition? How are we incorporating our custodial staff in those conversations and that process?
So for speaking, Board Member Cole, for speaking specific to HVAC systems, I don't know that we have a tremendous amount of conversations with our custodial team, but we definitely have a bunch of them with our maintenance team, because they're much more involved. I mean, we have conversations with all of our staff, whether it's understanding how a thermostat works. Like, I'll be honest, that's some of our biggest conversations right now, is we get complaints about room temperature because staff literally don't understand that they now have a functioning digital thermostat that they can use to control the temperature in their room. So we certainly try to engage with all the staff. Some of the staff we engage with more before we launch projects to make sure we're making good decisions about planning. And some of it's engaging with staff in the building to make sure they understand how to open filter compartments, how to do basic troubleshooting, how to adjust temperatures, just depending on the system. Some of them have more adjustments than others.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, until something comes to mind later, is around systems development. So what processes, what protocols, what systems are you developing or putting in place to ensure that we are fully functional at, the beginning of school? And I mean, whether it's a school year, whether it's a particular season, what are we doing to ensure that we are fully functional?
So Board Member Cole, I don't know that I can fully answer that one on my own, because that is very much a kind of a business and operations overall project. And I think it'll be a long-term project. I don't know if Dr. James wants to jump in, but like, planning is going to be at the heart of it, I think, for us.
I mean, for instance, my concern over the last week as we transition from cooling to heating is making sure that our existing buildings, that our maintenance team is going through, making sure existing boilers are up and running and ready to go. I mean, in terms of any of the construction projects, when we're talking about, whether we are rebuilding a school, we're following the Ohio School Design Manual, which, is what most districts are currently using to upgrade their facilities. And then in terms of, the systems that we're using, that variable refrigerant flow system, which uses the heat pumps, and for the types of buildings that we have, where we have to put more rooftop units than doing, more central HVAC units, is probably the best that we can do for some of the older buildings, even the, 27 or so that are on the list where we're going to be putting in air conditioning for cafeterias and auditoriums are most likely going to require rooftop type units and not more of a central plant, just because of the way they were constructed. So, those are things that I'm not the expert, but that's, what I work with from what I know from past experience and in working with Alex and his team and our consultants is, just trying to get the things that can fit, an existing building in terms of an upgrade.
Thank you for that. What I'm trying to really understand on my own and also draw out for any of us who are confused about it or not sure is the idea that there are myriad complexities here, and this is not an excuse. It is not. I think that we have considerable time. We deal with the same types of issues per annum. Every year it's the same thing. And I realize that there's some fiscal issues related to that as well for resources. But at the end of the day, that these are complex issues. I ran a building for a couple years that had rooftop units, heating and cooling. So I understand what it takes to repair those, the cost for repairing those. But at the end of the day, I think I just want to be very clear that we are working as diligently as we possibly can to design some systems that ensure full functionality in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Without lecturing, this board has given millions, tens of millions of dollars to that effort. And even this year, we have delegated allocated tens of millions of dollars to that effort, previous to trying to make a request for a ballot initiative. At the end of the day, I just want to get a clear idea that we're making the best effort beyond yeoman possible to ensure full functionality, and that we got some idea when our children will have that, a calendar date, an idea when that'll happen.
Board Member Cole, the only other thing I'll add is that I think perhaps the simplest and yet maybe most complex thing that can help make sure that we build that bandwidth, that ability, that knowledge to not only get that work started, but to continue it is an ongoing source of funding. Like, I think we've largely laid the groundwork through Operation Fix-It and the ESSER investment, that our teams finally understand that they can ask for something and it might actually happen. Because it's one thing to go through decades where things are not getting done because the resources simply aren't there. And at some point, I think people do kind of give up. So having that ongoing sustained source of funds so that we do plan together, not that we can plan for every situation that's going to occur, but it ties our teams together because our work is together, and we're either all successful together or we will fail together. And I can tell you our intention is to succeed together.
I thank you. And just in closing thought, Madam President, I hope that again, is much more inclusive and out-of-the-box thinking in terms of incorporating custodial staff as well. These are the staff who are in that building day to day, know it inside and out, and not just from the standpoint of troubleshooting, as you obviously invest training in that. But I think it's important to incorporate them in those conversations, knowing when things are going to happen in a building, all of that. If there's any out-of-the-box way to be inclusive of their insights and experiences, please, by all means, leverage them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Board Member Beckerly.
I think I owe you particularly a thank you for this report, because this is the report where you went out and made sure in every building you knew what it was, and so thank you. And, this is a baseline, and now we're moving forward, and we have the definitive lay of the land, and I am grateful because I know that this was an effort. Thank you for your answer, your last answer, because I think that's a really important one for us to hear, because that is how the board can help. Dr. T. Pierce's point, what can we do? We need to go back to the ballot or come up with some other creative way to get you your dedicated funding source so these buildings can go forward. And I really, really appreciate your point about when you keep asking and there's nothing there, you stop asking, and that culture, that climate, that mentality, you're sensing a shift. And that's good news for us. We need that shift, and we need to deliver. So we need to take up sooner rather than later when we go back to the ballot, and how and what our strategy is, and that's on us. And we hear you and we thank you.
Thank you for the comments.
Dr. Pierce.
So my question is more for administration and probably Dr. James and Dr. Dixon. Alex, Mr. Trevino, I greatly appreciate your presentation. We receive a number of emails from concerned parents and staff about the temperatures in buildings. When we have those cold days and the heat doesn't automatically kick on, because some of our buildings do have these older systems, is there a way that we can inform people to just dress appropriately or just to be prepared for that? I have to remind myself daily as I walk into my building. I was freezing all day today because our heat has not kicked on, but I think that reminder to our families in particular buildings would be helpful.
Agreed, and this is always a difficult time of the year for building operators, because you're in, I went home yesterday and I had to, turn on the air conditioning because at the day it got hot, and then at night I had to turn on the heat. And so I understand that, but yeah, I think we can communicate that, maybe I'm dating myself, but back in the old days, we had the sweater or the sweatshirt, things like that. But, I've spoken to Mr. Oldham and the team about making sure, we're addressing the, getting our facilities into heating mode. So, but that's a point well taken about communicating to our parents.
We would appreciate it as a community. Thank you.
Board Member Vera.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Trevino, for this report. I guess my question also kind of lies in terms of, now that we are moving into those colder months, What additional support are these buildings going to receive, especially for those that do not have proper heating systems? We think about a lot of these schools that don't have air conditioning in their gymnasiums, but they're playing volleyball in these gymnasiums. They're getting ready to play basketball in these gymnasiums. Are we providing extra fans, heaters in the winter, especially I know Mifflin Middle School very well, in terms of when that building is freezing the way that it is, what exactly are we prepared to do to help our schools while we're in the process of fixing the bigger picture, whereas these kids are presently in these buildings right now? Because I'm not seeing a whole lot of additional resources in these buildings. It's just simply hot, or it's just simply cold, and do we have a plan for how we can at least meet them where they're at and provide some level of comfort? I know it's, you know, if maybe I don't know this to be correct, but it is at the teacher's discretion if they move out of a classroom if temperatures are too hot or too cold. And so is there flexibility for schools that are a little more stringent about having coats on? Will students be given the opportunity to keep their coats on? So I know that was a jam-packed question, but I'm thinking about we're moving into the winter months. We have a lot of schools that are still struggling with the, you know, the heating aspect. I guess I want to understand, what are we prepared to do?
So Board Member Rivera, I'll try to answer the question as best I can, and then I may hand off to Dr. James. So certainly on the buildings that are involved in projects, outside of the fact that we may have a few uncomfortable mornings with the low overnight temperatures, I fully expect we'll have permanent heating systems running before we get anywhere near a freezing day. So I don't anticipate any issues with our big projects. One thing that works in our favor, so as we get into this time of the year, we can do a lot of what we call free cooling. So even those spaces, those gymnasiums, those auditoriums that are not air conditioned, so they do have ventilation, and so we can bring in as much outside air as the systems allow, and we can keep those spaces pretty comfortable, which would be important for things like our winter sports, to be able to keep the gyms as cool. So that part, as long as our systems are running, is fairly easy. The part I'm going to have to defer, or I'll just answer on their behalf, would be the heat in the other buildings that are not part of projects currently.
Right, so, and I'll let Mr. Odom chime in, but I know when we've had these issues last year, we did have some buildings where, and I think we were in a similar situation where some of the summer projects were, you know, transitioning to completion. We did have students who had coats. We did, in some cases, have temporary heat brought in to buildings to make sure we could do, you know, something with temperatures. And then, on occasion, have kids move from one class to a class that was available that had heat, you know, in a building. If it's a situation where, you know, we have no heat in a building, that's where the conversation is whether school happens that day or not. So we take all those into consideration.
Thank you for that. So Dr. James, do we have enough heating units, like those extra units you were just describing? Let's say, do we have enough to cover the amount of schools that are not part of this project if we needed to have them at any given time?
Those are things where we have vendors lined up to bring in temporary heat, and it looks different. Some are much larger units, and then some are very small, as Dr. Dixon pointed out last year, with a few. But there's a variety of sources. It's not like we stock a bunch of units in the warehouse, but we do work with vendors who can provide the units as necessary.
Thank you.
One quick detail I might add too, just because I think things sound simple oftentimes to, you know, the average family that comes into our buildings. You know, so the question would be like, well, why don't you just plug in space heaters, right? I can go buy them at Walmart for $50 or less. It's the same problem we have with air conditioning, and why we don't use a lot of window air conditioners. Number one, they require a tremendous amount of power. So we could get the heaters and plug them in, but we don't have enough infrastructure to support them. So to Dr. James's point, when we do things like temporary heating, you're going to see things like ductwork outside of buildings, because there's going to be the need to bring in some kind of fossil fuel, whether that's propane or some other source to provide that heating. And so that's why you don't see things like space heaters throughout buildings, because we just don't have, like, the electrical infrastructure is not designed to support them.
So it's not a cost thing, it'll blow a fuse thing.
Correct.
Good to know.
Other questions for Alex? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. James.
Okay, next we have Rodney Stuffelbein, our Interim Director of Transportation, for a transportation update.
And Mr. Stufflebeam, as you're making your way to the podium, I want to say thank you. I know that this has been challenging, and you are our interim director. You stepped in, and I know you and your team, you're trying your best. It's a hot mess. We all know you're going to tell us it's a lot of things that we cannot control. And I just want to say thank you for trying and every day in there. I know it's so stressful and there's a lot more work to do. And so I just really want you to know how much we appreciate you and your team. And we're here to support you in any way that we can. And we know. So go ahead.
President Adair, thank you. Vice President Reyes, members of the board. It has been a difficult start. I will start out with that. So we're going to go over a few things tonight. We're going to start with going through our routing, our drivers, and what our timeline looks for what we've been able to develop to hopefully alleviate some of the problems that we've identified. I will start with the routing tonight. I wish there was a simple fix for this. I really, really do. Board Member Beckerly, we had that conversation at the last meeting where we said that it's a very intricate piece of equipment that it is. When everything is right, it is right, and when things are not right in it, it's a nightmare. This has unfortunately not been right from the get-go. So we've identified a lot of those issues that we've want to be able to fix, we just don't have the capability of fixing. So in that sense, we've had continued issues for our routers to be able to just make on-the-fly adjustments. That's just not something that we can't have at our disposal. We need to be able to make on-the-fly adjustments. The efficiencies of the routes. In the beginning, this looked really well. And we thought this is going to work. This is going to get us down to those number of routes that we need to offset the shortages that we're seeing, not just here, but nationwide. With that being said, the things that we didn't know about at that point in time reared its ugly head within about a week after we received our first solution. With that being said, there was about 4,000 students there that showed up that we didn't know about. Within another couple weeks, we had a fair at the Fort Hays compound, and there was about another 7,000 or 8,000 students that we didn't know that did not opt in for the transportation. That in itself created a very difficult situation, compromised what the routers were able to do. It set us back several weeks. Some of the things that we've been able to identify is the inability to make changes that are needed immediately. File transfers and errors causing incorrect information with no ability to correct. We've worked with the Infinite Campus Group. We've worked with Alpha Group. We've done everything we possibly can to make sure that all the data is correct. It still somehow comes up on a rare occasion, on a few occasions, that information still comes in incorrectly, or it gets changed through the process somehow, and then we don't know about it until after the fact. We're more of reactive instead of being proactive. Errors for stops, bus stop locations, and things of that nature. When we supplied Alpha Route with the mapping solution that shows our bus stops that are approved and everything, part of their solution, some of the algorithms will move those stops, and unbeknownst to us, we wouldn't know that it would be a corner stop, but now that corner stop has been moved to a front of a house stop that there isn't a student that lives there, and things of that nature. So those kinds of things that we would see, we can't fix internally. We have to notify Alpha. Alpha does everything they possibly can. It's just not fast. Numbers of routes being created. Currently today, as we stand here, we have 681 routes. That is a number that is 100, at least 100 more than where we were last year at this time with VersaTrans. Our current staffing level sits at 535 active drivers, if everyone was to show up. Part of that, we have a average of about 44 that we see per day that are calling off. And we understand that there's needs that happen, and we talked about this today. It's not necessarily the same ones calling off. We're asking a lot from our drivers right now due to that shortage. And there are certain things that they can only do so much within a 12-hour day, and then they have to take care of themselves for certain instances. The time needed to correct these errors that we are able to be, so that we're able to address them internally. Those are some of the things that we've seen. I'll move into the bus driver attendance now. I've already spoken. The numbers that I have on here are actually two less than what we did when I prepared this report on Friday. We're at 535 right now, and we also have 20 supervisors that are also driving on a daily basis. Those supervisors are driving in the morning and in the afternoons, and then they'll use the mid portion of their day to do their daily jobs. Those include our routers, our compound supervisors, any person that we can utilize, our training department. All of those people are driving on a daily basis. We've had one of our operations managers, our field supervisors, everybody that we can possibly send and still keep staff in to be able to manpower the needs and the emergencies that pop up during those times. We have 19 drivers that are in training, and there's supposed to be another 6 that are slated to start on October 3rd. That would have been today. So we should have a total of 25 in the training department right now. That process will be 4 to 6 weeks before we see them. It's not a quick process. We have 681 routes combined for CCS and charter non-public schools. We have increased the number of routes that we've outsourced. UTS has been gracious to be able to help us. They've taken on 40 routes themselves. There are 25 with VAT with a proposal of another 5 that they might be able to help us with. So we're looking at the 60 outsourced routes. A breakdown of those routes right now are 588 regular routes. All of them are, all CCS routes equals 191. All CNP equals 66, and a mix of CNP and CCS for 331. You'll notice there'll be 93 to be determined routes. The 93 to be determined routes are routes where we have kids that we have their information. We have no room to put them or no time to put them on a route. When I say time, in the mornings, our high school routes can start earlier. We don't want to start earlier, but we can. We have that ability. We'll start that route earlier and able to be to the high school at the time that we need to drop off. The difficult portion is that short period of time in between the drop-off at the high school and the time we have to pick up the elementary students and get to the elementary school on time. So we have a time issue there. That is also happens in the afternoons. It's just reversed. You have unlimited time to take the elementary students home, not that we want to be dropping them off at 5 or 6, but that time frame in between the high school drop-off and the elementary pickup is detrimental to how many buses you have. The shorter that time, the more buses it takes to do that. On an average, we have an 18% call-off rate. For the week of September 26th, we averaged 43.63 drivers in the morning and 45.56 drivers in the afternoon per day. I'll transition to the timeline. We have been brainstorming as much as we possibly can. Not that we don't want to see Alpha succeed, but we need to have something there. One of the things that we identified first was we basically put all of our eggs in one basket with Alpha. We know now that that was definitely probably not the best decision. So what we've done is we've looked at all of our options that we have out there. One of the options is we can bring Versatrans back in. We still have them on contract. We can extend that contract and run both Alpha and Versatrans simultaneously. And what we want to do is immediately start that this week. We've asked for additional resources. We've asked retired routers to come back and help us. We've asked for retired employees to come back and help be a liaison through our charter non-publics and things of that nature. We are working diligently to try and fix the problems that we've been able to identify. First, we need the tools to be able to do it. In that same process, our routers are very familiar with Versatrans. They know how to do things. They can manipulate that system just like this. So we know over a time frame it's still going to take at least a little bit amount of time, probably a 7 to 8 week span if they were just to continue working in Alpha, because mind you, we still have to keep Alpha running in the background. That's everything we have at our disposal right now, and that's what's established. But if we bring the additional staff in, we can have them dedicated to working on just that with uninterrupted work time. That process hopefully would get done sooner than that 7 to 8 weeks, but as a time frame, we looked at a 7 to 8 week span. On a normal summer, it takes us about 6 weeks with all 4 routers plus 4 supervisors helping. That's 8 people working at it. So that process is beginning today. We've got the student file loaded into Versatrans. We've got everything ready to be able to start and begin that process. The process transition will, like I said, take about 7 to 8 weeks to do. We're still going to keep Alpha Route running in the background. We have to at this point. You can't just stop that completely. We're going to give Alpha the ability to try and fix some of these issues. I think a lot of it goes back to the issues that when we first ran their solution and their algorithm, it was based on that 29,500 students. Now we're sitting at 38,661, I believe, as of today. So let them keep what's working in the front. We'll still be able to monitor and change and work through it and fix the issues as we are made aware of them. But also on their back end, they can take that new solution and run a whole new solution and not worry about having to provide it to us, because we're going to start working in Versatrans. And Versatrans is going to be what we're going to phase in here sometime around January is what we're looking at. We would hope to have the routes completed in Versatrans about mid-November, and we would go through the whole process again. We would rebid for our drivers. We would send out mailers. We would be able to have everything in place. We would open up the lines of communication that actually worked and use those lines of communications to communicate to parents, to communicate to the schools, our CMP partnerships, everything that had worked over the last few years with Versatrans, we can get back in place and have that back in our side to help communicate better. The drivers would, like I said, in December, the drivers would rebid and the mailers would be going out prior to the Christmas break. That way that everybody would have absolutely plenty of time to know what their new route's on, when they start, where their stops are, and it also gives us time to vet everything. And then we would like to roll this out in January, on January 3rd. I will continue with, again, I need to reiterate that we're going to have to keep both systems running for at least the next year in my process. That's the way we look at it. That way we'll know more data, more efficiencies once he gives us back that second routing solution. We can compare them, see if the things that have been giving us problems have been able to be fixed, and work through those problems. At the completion of the new routes, we will continue to run Alpha as they work to address all the concerns and the issues that we've brought forth to them. And the goal is to have all of this routed and completed in a timely manner to allow us to efficiently and accurately route our students and all students that we transport.
Before I turn it over to board members, I'm going to ask you kind of the question I kind of said, how can we help you? What is it the board can do for you right now in this current situation to help you?
I believe tonight we have on the agenda is the authorization to re-up the contract with Versatrans. That will go a long way. That'll help us get this tool that we can work with to help speed this process up, and that way we're not stuck using just Alpha Route right at this time. And at no point do we want to say Alpha may not be something that we could possibly use. We just think he needs to refine it and not try and build it on the fly, and let him, now that he knows what we need, he may be able to refine that and bring something back to the table that is maybe possibly usable and very efficient. At this point, we can't wait any longer. We can't keep beating our head against the brick wall. That's what we feel like we're doing.
One more before I turn it to board members, and this is over to Dr. James and Dr. Dixon. There's a lot here that has led us to this point. In your minds, what are the big root cause issues to how we got here today?
So one is we still have a driver shortage. Number two, when you look at how we're set up as a district, as a urban, and I've been open about my opinion, I think we may transport too many people, where I think we need to look at the whole structure of the districts and what the expectations are. In many districts, it's just the state minimum, so it'll be, the K through 8, more than 2 miles away, but many of our choice programs at the high school level, we're transporting kids. And then the other unfortunate thing is like where some of our schools are located, when you look at Mifflin High School, lack of sidewalks and where it's low, and then a lack of a COTA bus stop, because I think that could help. And the other thing, we met with the state superintendent today, brainstorming some solutions. I think we're using an old paradigm for a new reality. And I think we need some legislative fixes on, some of it's just, to me, it's an outdated transportation. A yellow bus cannot solve all of our problems. We may need to look at some more flexible options through the use of vans. I mean, I even brought up the whole businesses have corporate Uber access, and why can't we have that for school, particularly for some of our special needs populations, as long as the training's in place, the safety issues are in place in terms of the type of vehicle, that can be used. I think, we need some more flexibility. No one's talking about putting kids in unsafe situations, but we need some additional flexibility in terms of the vehicles that we're using, because even this morning in the paper, I believe, COTA's having shortages of drivers. Many of our surrounding districts, we're getting into a point where, they're luring people from us, they're luring people from the vendor, and we met with OPSI this morning as well, and we're brainstorming some solutions where they're willing to help us, there, and maybe it means bringing in other classifications to help, part-time driver positions to help, and then looking at some other partners in the community that might be able to help, who have people who are, CDL certified.
Dr. Dixon, you want to add anything?
No, I think you captured all of it. And one of the reasons we went with Alpha Right, just explored that, is kind of be innovative. How could we find another company that will allow us to transport differently? If we really set the number of students that we knew we wanted to transport, we actually used a model some of our surrounding districts were doing that's at opt-in. And so what we learned, and as we stated, that maybe we didn't do the best job communicating that out and making sure that parents really understood what that meant. Because when we had our initial numbers, I think we were around 26 or 27,000. We thought was the number. And then we later found that many families said, oh, I didn't realize that I had to do an additional process. So I think initially, here's a routing system that will allow us to route more efficiently and more effectively. The reason we explored this particular company, and then looked at other districts and said, hey, with this new platform and with us opting in, we thought it would be a perfect marriage in a sense. And then as Rodney, as Mr. Stubblefield has outlined, it just didn't work well with our organization because of all the nuances, the number of students that we transport, on top of having the driver shortage. Yeah.
We're going to go Pierce, Reyes, Beckerly.
Thank you so much for this update, Director Stuffelbein. I have a couple of questions. And maybe it's for the entire administrative team. My first one, Dr. James, thank you so much for bringing up the purchase of vans. A number of our extracurricular activities have been impacted by the transportation situation. I'm talking in particular high school bands, middle school athletics, high school athletics. Where do we stand in purchasing vans for our extracurricular programs at a minimum?
I believe we have some vans in the pipeline, but it's, supply chain issues with those. But that is something we're absolutely looking to do. I've had a history of using vans, both independent contracted and the district's owns, particularly for some of our smaller sports teams and also for some of those other during the day activities.
So a supply chain issue. Just help me understand.
Vehicles, just like air conditioning.
How many
equipment or vehicles, getting them ordered, and then a long lag time before we get them delivered.
We can't go into car lots and buy minivans.
The kind that we use, 9 passengers or less, and the proper seating, those are typically special order.
Okay, so we need to special order the vans, and right now they're delayed because of supply chain issues.
Yes.
Okay, next question.
Oh, wait. Talk to me.
Oh, you can answer? Okay. Yes.
Our expected delivery date is the summer of '23. They have to be built. And that is, we're not the only school district that's ordering them. And so any district right now that goes to order one van, you might as well say you're not going to see it for a year.
Yeah.
We were able to do 25 with an expected delivery date of July of '23.
I'm gonna just venture out here a little bit and just dive into the deep end. Those 25, were they allocated one per high school, one per middle school? Where are those going? Do we know?
Cannot answer that. I don't know on that.
Okay, next question. With our, sometimes when transportation is unfeasible, we pay the parents for providing the transportation for students. Have we thought about offering payment to parents who have the ability to bring their students to school? Why are we both with anybody who wants to answer?
We have. We've reached out to ODE to ask if there was a potential to offer an incentive type of pay. Their legal counsel has not. They've basically said they don't want you to try and do an incentive type of pay to circumvent payment in lieu of. So it's not recommended, and they do not endorse it.
So at this point, and maybe my logic, help me, maybe my logic is off. What I hear us saying is we are going to have 2 transportation systems working at the same time. Mm-hmm. We currently have students that are getting on the bus as early as 5:48 in the morning, and we're saying we can make it earlier. I have an issue with that. We have students who are getting delivered home later, and then on top of all of that, we're saying, well, hey, we're going to reroute you, and you'll potentially have a new route and a new driver by June 3rd, when it's traditionally freezing cold, January 3rd, when it's traditionally freezing cold. To me, it sounds like it's impractical for us to provide transportation for some of our students. We have evidence, we have facts here that are showing that it's unfeasible. Mm-hmm. So the Ohio Department of Education has ignored all of that?
Those have to be submitted 30 days prior to the first day of school. Yes, ma'am.
So what has to be submitted? Please clarify.
Impractical for transportation has to be submitted to ODE 30 days prior to your first day of school.
We get those throughout the year.
We do. If they move into the district and we have no room to put them on, then we can submit them as impractical. We have to do it within 14 days of their enrollment.
And so because of our process being so complex, we are at a point where we were too late to say impractical for
And
all of these students.
The other factor to that is House Bill 110 says once you start a transportation service, you complete that transportation service for the entire year. You cannot stop it. I've investigated every avenue possible.
I'm gonna continue to jump in the deep end. I might drown by the time this meeting is over.
That's why we need legislative help.
Yes, so can we discuss that? Do you all have proposed recommendations that we can then craft legislation and a resolution to take to the Ohio Department of Education?
Yes, based on our conversations today with ODE, their legal counsel, and the state superintendent, we are doing just that. Coming up with what we propose, and there are some things that they're looking at. For instance, reaching out to Job and Family Services and the Ohio Veterans Commission to find out if we can get, folks who are coming back from military duty who may have a CDL can come and, work out a deal with us to drive. So those are some things we're looking at. And then, in terms of a legislative fix, you have to remember, the Ohio Department of Education's hands are tied as well. From the legislature giving the rules that they have to follow after they're promulgated.
Yeah, look, we'll advocate on all levels, right? We need a multifaceted approach to this. So my next question then just kind of relates to, y'all know I'm going to ask about graduation and academic outcomes all the time. At this point, we have students who are missing valuable time in the classroom. What's our plan to deal with our academic proficiency levels as it is going to be impacted by transportation? Are we going to give leeway to our educators to move some of our standards and proficiencies to lower levels? Are we going to, again, advocate at the state level for some leniency when it comes to testing? What's the plan?
Right. So right now, we're looking at our overall attendance numbers, and we're at 83.8% daily attendance. So we don't see that our attendance is decreasing. And we also are making sure that we have those students, and we categorize them as TWP, transportation wait period, to see if we have students that are waiting to be routed. We found, and we had about 38 students that were categorized as such, and so we have moved those students and made sure we're routing those students. And I have Dr. Klein give me the updated numbers, but 2 weeks ago, we had about 1,400 students that were, that we did not know, there were no-shows. And so we have our school attendance teams calling those families to make sure, to see if those students are still waiting to be routed, or did those students move to other places. So we want to make sure that what seems like it is a big issue, but we want to make sure we quantify that to see how many students are not showing up and why, and what can we do to make sure that we provide them the resources. We know that one particular high school, Mifflin High School, has a number of students. They don't have sidewalks. That's where we've tried to explore a stop there. So we know that that is one school that we're working with the principal to make sure that we're providing resources for students. If they need to do some work online, just making sure, because the students have been to school at least one day, but may not be there consecutive days because of transportation issues. But again, just want to make sure that we can quantify what is the number of students. Is it more? Is it less? But right now, we're looking about 83.8% attendance rate.
And I think the type of students too, right? So if we have our special education students who have not been routed because, again, we have a shortage for those particular buses or drivers, what are we doing to help those students who may be at multiple schools, not just at say, Mifflin?
Right. So one of it is making sure we know exactly what school and what students. Like a lot of the concerns that we have that have been brought to our attention are students that we are responsible for transporting, but they're not students that attend CCS schools. Students that are attending CCS schools, we are following up with the parents, those families, just to make sure that they have the resources. Are they getting to school? Are they missing work? So we're just working on that building by building, because initially we were not sure because there were so many students, so many complaints that was brought to our attention. But as we started digging deeper in the data, we found out, for example, there was 38 students that had not been routed, where in some sense we had heard there were hundreds. But again, we want to make sure, and that's why Dr. Klein and her team are capturing the data, make sure that the data that Dr. Klein has talks to the data that, that we have in transportation, so that we are individualized. You know, we're meeting with parents, we're calling parents, and making sure the students have what they need. And the one school that we know, again, is Mifflin High School, as we know that students have been missing, and a lot of them are EL students. And the principal, we've been working with the principal to make sure that she has the resources that she needs to help her students.
Last question. With our charter schools, we're responsible for providing the transportation and continuing. How are we going to communicate to each charter school, their leadership and teams, to let them know that this rerouting, again, is going to happen in January?
Thank you. So today, one of the things that we asked ODE to do is do a convening with all of our communication experts, because we send them our message, but they may need a more customized message just for their families. And we asked them, would they be the convener of that, and they agreed. And so that was part of it, because they have, you know, they may not need as many things translated. They may have some different concerns that we don't have. But the messaging, we want to make sure is applicable to their schools as well. And they agreed to convene and work with us on that.
And we've asked to establish a CMP liaison.
Yes.
To come in to work in our routing department with our CMP routers and our contractors and our VATs and our UTSs to be that liaison and just purely 100% communicate with them. It may still mean that we have to do it by phone or face-to-face until we get the tools to be able to communicate the way they're used to us being able to communicate. But that's what one thing we are asking is to have a CMP liaison to handle just directly all of those.
And we also asked to ensure that we have a specific recruitment strategy just for the CNP schools, so that they can have their community of drivers too. So that was one of the things we talked about in the earlier meeting, and they agreed to. They thought was a good strategy for them too. So they're going to help in our recruitment efforts with our HR team to maybe recruit in their spaces, in their communities, our team, and take it there in order to get the drivers, additional drivers.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Excellent.
Reyes Beckerly Brown.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bless you.
Thank you.
Because I know we've had several conversations about this issue. I think one of the things that you mentioned in your report, that we had such an increase of opt-in individuals, it seems like that happened when we had an event that was in person. So perhaps something that is a lesson learned, that wonderful fair that we had, maybe as we roll into next year, we may have to do that earlier. I believe that is something that happened to districts, to nonprofit organizations, to all sorts of different organizations as we opened up after COVID. There was a lot of stress that was around that. So a lot of people didn't see all the emails, didn't see, and if their emails are anything like the rest of ours, they probably got all sorts of emails for high school football and register this and register that and look at this after school. So I think that may be something that as a lesson learned, especially noting that there was thousands of people that requested that. As you talked about having that CNP, I think is what you said, is there an opportunity to talk about a universal busing system for the communities that are within our district, i.e. Upper Arlington, Whitehall, so forth? If we're all experiencing the same issue, is there an opportunity for us to build a cohort of buses? I know that's a whole slew of issues, but perhaps I don't believe that we can continue to take each other's bus drivers when we all live within the same parameters we're busing folks. They're in the outline of our district. Is there an opportunity to talk about a cohort, a universal busing system for the people within our outlines? I don't know. I appreciate the communications. My question is, alternatives as we transition to Versatrans, for those people, we're experiencing all these issues. What are we communicating to our parents as alternatives if your child has not been bus routed? What options do parents have? I mean, I know we're not a Chicago, I know we're not a New York, where many of our parents are used to putting a middle schooler or an elementary school student on a COTA bus, but I know that many people talked about carpooling and, is this an opportunity for our PTAs, PTOs, our principals to talk about carpools? What alternatives do we have as we transition to?
Right now, they're really limited. What we're trying to do, as soon as we're made aware of one, we try and circumvent the situation and see if there's things that we can do in Alpha to get them on a bus as quickly as possible. That's the biggest thing. There are students out there that are to be determined that we're still trying to get into routes as well. We've become very creative in how we use Alpha right now. It's definitely being used differently than it was designed to be used, because we've had no other alternative. So we try and fit them in and get them on a route as quickly as we possibly can. And with that being said, it still takes us a little bit of time. I have one that I know one of my routers has been working on all day today to try and find a place to put this student on a bus so that we can get them on a bus. And she's driving in the morning, and then the midday she's working trying to find it, but she's having to search each route to find one that goes through that area to be able to create a stop and put them there. And it's not going to do it in the routing system, so it won't show up in the routing system, but we can do it through communication via phone, through the school, and to the parent. And that's what we're working at right now.
Thank you. I've also heard that there's a delay once you've rerouted a child. There's a delay on that information or that reroute hitting Infinite Campus.
Yes.
And then when a parent or a district personnel call customer service, I know, you knew it was coming. I don't believe people would be so upset if they knew that they were going to wait an hour or 2 hours. As we look at our customer service opportunities, there are going to be some calls that are urgent. My child is missing. I've been waiting for 2 hours, haven't heard from them. That can cause an emergency for us if something did happen to that child, and it took us 2 hours to get to the parent. I know that parents are doing a lot of the tracking apps on our kids' phones as they head there, but as we address customer service for parents and district personnel, are we looking at how we respond? Are we triaging how we respond to parents versus district personnel?
Yes, we're looking at the totality of it. This is a new area for me as far as the call center goes. I've not been accustomed to it, and we've identified some very critical areas that we need to improve on. The infrastructure to be able to do it, we've met with them several times, and it's going to take more than just adding another line here and doing things like that. We've implemented, there is a principal hotline, but it's been compromised, thus leading to more problems. So we're in the discussions of changing that and doing some things to help with those kind of situations. There is a lost child number that is part of that, and forgive me, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but that jumps you to the front of the line, so that if it is an important one like that, we ask that during that time frame that students are being transported in the morning and in the afternoon, that only those important calls are being brought in. My bus hasn't arrived, or I have a lost student in the afternoon. that the information of I need to check on my bus stop and things like that happen during the middle portion of the day. That again has been compromised. It's all because of the things that we've been facing this year. So the hours are not really conducive to the 7 to 9 for the emergencies, and then the midday for I need information about my students' busing information, and then it's all taking place throughout the whole day.
I know the 211 emergency food hotline, because they'll have long waits, have utilized texting. And I know that some of our immigrant and refugee and some of our limited English families might work better through that. For example, 211, you can put your name, your address, your callback information, things like that, and has worked really well for those folks in the 211. And we're talking about 179 food pantries in Franklin County, so perhaps that's a organization we might want to reach out to. This is going to be a loaded question. I'm going to do a Dr. Pierce dive into the ocean. How do we know this is going to work, guaranteed to work? Because if we communicate to our parents to say that we're attempting to find solutions, as a parent, I'm going to expect on January 3rd that I'm going to be able to put my child in a reasonable hour, and I'm going to on the bus, and then a reasonable hour them coming back. How can we say, or how are we going to communicate to our parents the efforts and the expectations around this new strategy that we're attempting to implement?
That's a very good question. Versatrans is tried and true. We've had it for the last several years. I'm not exactly sure how long it's been here. It works. Our people know how to navigate that system. They know how to make that system work correctly. The communication tools that we have as a part of that system worked over the last couple years. The tool that worked really well for us last year was Ed Central, I think it was what it was called. It was a communication tool, and it was very positive. We're in talks with them right now to re-up with that so that we have that ability. Versatrans is not going to fix the shortage. It's going to let us manage the shortage much better and more efficiently to alleviate and get us down. One thing that we looked at last year when we compared the numbers, we were at about 580 routes last year, and we were able to cover that for the most part. We've outsourced 60 routes this year already, so we're down to the 520. That's more manageable than the 580 was last year, and we were able to get through it last year. We want to keep increasing the outsource if we can. There's been discussions and ideas about which direction do we want to go. Do we want to split CCS and then CMP be all contracts again? We don't know if that's the best choice or not, but there's things that we're entertaining and looking at to give us the best ability to provide service for everybody, irregardless CCS or CNPs. I would like to say that all the data and all the past history of Versatrans in the last couple of years, this will work. It's going to have its small hiccups, but this is a system that is much manageable for our routers and to be able to tweak and do the things that we need to be able to do. And we will have a better understanding after this week. This week is count week, so we are actually getting a student count, so we'll know who's actually riding, but then we can also look at the TBDs that are to be determined, and hopefully we'll have a better ability to understand, hey, we've only got a handful over here on this route and a handful on this route. We can combine these to make one route and free up an entire another run. That's what we don't have in Alpha right now, because everybody's routed and everything is at a max capacity. So I'm confident that this will work with all of the communication that we've had with our team and everything like that, and bringing the routers into it and talking to them, because they're the ones that live and breathe in this. And their concept is we can make Versatrans work. We can't make Alpha work to our ability right now.
And thank you so much for all hands on deck. And I know, Dr. James, you mentioned a little bit about the alternative of non-transporting high schools. We worked as a board very hard to add high schools back a couple years ago. If we have to go to that, and I know you will, just kind of look at what options, do we have our high school, the high schoolers have the ability to actually make it to school. One of the reasons we added the high schools many years ago is because we had a low ability to get our students to school at that time. Again, now more people are driving younger, but before we make a decision, as we're looking at that as a possibility, just kind of interviewing, assessing how our high school students are actually going to school. And I know that'll change as our lower grades transition. So thank you.
Beckerly, Brown, and Vera. Okay, I have a question about that number 38. Are we saying that there are 38 students that we're having trouble transporting right now and that everybody else has a route? What's that 38?
The 38 was the students that were identified as a transportation wait period. So they hadn't received routing yet, and when we identified them, we looked at each one of them, and we were able to get them a route. So the 38 are routed.
Do we have a number for how many students are not being picked up?
No.
That's that number when I said we had about 1,400 students that were no-shows, and those.
You don't know how many of those are no-shows
Correct,
because of
right.
transportation, or how many no-shows for other reasons?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the list that our attendance teams are working on.
I think kind of like where Mr. Trevino got us with, we have the baseline, and he rolled up his sleeves and got us the baseline. I think that what we need, it seems like, is the baseline for this number. And I think that's important. And then I guess one of the things where, I'm going out of order where I was going, but Dr. Pierce said, what can we do? I think there's a few things we can do. Maybe one thing the board can do is to not have you keep coming and doing these reports, because I keep thinking how much of your time was spent preparing this report and getting your team preparing this report. I mean, this is a crisis. And so, we need to be judicious of your time and the time that gets distracted spending preparing for this. So that's one thing. So, and which is getting me back to the baseline piece, because I feel like you can report to us your status and your progress, but I don't know that we need to have you up here doing this, because I know this is a huge drag on your time and your preparation, and I don't want us to contribute to that. I do want us to have the information, though. So I think that, there's a reporting process, and you keep us apprised of how it's going. I don't know that my colleagues agree with me, but that's one thing that occurs to me about what we could do. The next thing that we can do is to the State House effort. I think all of us probably have more connections than you realize across the state in different contexts, that that we may be able to use this as a moment to galvanize a lot of support. It occurs to me that other urbans have to be having this problem. Rurals are probably having a similar problem. And let's think if maybe this is a moment we can figure out how to lock arms. And if we lock arms on this, maybe we can lock arms on some other things. And that is something the board can help with. So please don't hesitate to think out of the box on that front. And maybe, because in my fantasies, I feel like if we got those communities joined going forward, there's a lot of things that we might be able to move in the State House that, because there's a commonality there of concerns. The next thing I wanted to say was, when we say, what do you need? I think, and organizationally, we have a climate and a culture of not saying, I need this laundry list. We say, oh, we don't need anything, we'll figure it out, and so what do you need, becomes, do you need national experts to come in? Do you need, I'm just saying things, but please don't hesitate to say, I need, larger resources, smart, because this is a huge problem. I mean, we have a bigger problem than CODA has because we've got more routes, more students, more this. I mean, it's huge. The next thing is, this is a systems problem. And I feel a little bit badly that you're up here by yourself because this is a programming problem because we transport 45% of our kids across the city. It's perhaps there's potential in solutions. When I think about it, there's partners that have vans, Godman Guild, other Big Brothers Big Sisters. Like if there was more of an it's all hands on deck within the transportation department. But I'm thinking that if we could connect better with other our engagement people, family ambassadors, who's doing after-school program. There's kids that get picked up and get driven into after-school programs. Maybe some of those vans could help. They're already daycare. They're already like commercial drivers, or maybe they're not because they're vans or whatever. Like, this isn't all hands on deck. This is a crisis, and I think that it's not just you. We all need to be holding you up in ways. Because it occurs to me, if we weren't so siloed, somebody would have said to you, that 29,000 number is way low. There's no way that this many of our high schools are really opting out or opting in or not opting in or whatever, because there's people in our district that know who we are and, would have a sense of, somebody should have given you a heads up that this is too low, And that's a overall silo problem. And I think, I would encourage, and what I would love to see way more than having you come up every time and having to give us this report. I mean, I want the data. I just don't know that this is fair. Is some evidence that we're working across the district and getting all of because this might be solved in a one of here. Right? We've got Godman Guild's van's going to pick up these kids in this neighborhood, and then they're off your list. Once you can, I just think there's opportunity there that it's going to be. Bits and pieces from different aspects of our organization that can come together. And then the other thing is CODA. I mean, this is an opportunity to start talking long-term, because it occurs to me that running a minibus or a shuttle bus from Mifflin to the nearest CODA sites, and that's probably going to be some version of that would be a really cool way to pivot into Lincus more systemically. And like, so what if we start, and maybe again, CODA's already doing that. You can call up in the South Side. Maybe we could hand all of the South Side off to CODA and then do something. I'm not, this is not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying, think about it.
Or making our high schools park and ride locations where they're, the bus is going to have to go there anyway. So it could be something like that.
Right.
Because I know they're limited through federal rules on what they can do in terms of schools and their stops. But.
And I think that, every crisis is an opportunity, and, bringing some of these partners in and that sort of thing at this moment might lead to longer-term solutions.
Thank you. Board Member Brown.
Thank you. I agree with virtually everything that has been said by any of our board members, and I don't want to repeat. I do want to highlight and ask a little bit more about communication with parents, because that's one of the areas in which we've seen lots of frustration. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of it is in transportation, how much is call center, and where this lies, and again, can't be siloed. But where parents can't even get a call answered, or they get a busy, or they get a machine. Mm-hmm. None of those are helpful. Or when they get a person who probably has been abused, and by the 16 previous callers, and is no longer in a good mood, and expresses some of that, or at least doesn't provide the patience and the listening that we hope they would. How do we solve or improve, I guess, that communications aspect of this. That's what I hear, and I assume that all of our board members hear some of, is there's the underlying problem, but then there's so much frustration with trying to get to the right person to get it addressed.
They just want answers, and that's what we're working to try and figure out. What kind of solutions do we need to up the number of people in the call center? We've looked at adding numbers. We've looked at adding a special number for just principals that's not compromised so that they can get through, because it's the same number. It just rings into the same facility. And the volume that you're getting is on a weekly basis. It's almost 3,000 to 4,000, and there's only 10 representatives in there to answer. So what we've looked at is we've increased the queue. We've done a lot of different things. We've investigated, do we just bring people in to answer the phones right now? That doesn't really help the situation, because they can't look at the information that the parent or the person on the other end is asking about, so there's no ability for them to answer. So they take the name down, and they hand it over to a supervisor, and now that person's handling 5 other ones. So it's a process that we're investigating to look at and see what improvements can we make to make this more efficient and better on the inside. And that is through an outside vendor that runs the call center, and I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head.
And we are also exploring just a district call center, period, right? So currently we have one, have customer relations at the board office. We have a separate one with transportation. So what we've been exploring is we just need one customer service hub that would be able to answer any calls from any parents. And we need more people. So we've been looking at CODA's model. They've offered the opportunity to come visit them to see how their model works. And we know, to your point, there are some districts that use outside vendors during peak time, beginning of the school year, mid-year, and end of the year. So we have been exploring those models. But you're right, parents are frustrated, they're waiting. We have we've allowed parents, they even call my office, and 2 of my people are helping, they're emailing to, right at this point, they want answers and they want them quickly. One of the things we also talked about in our meeting today with ODE is having that CNP liaison, and the drivers just for CNP, but really to be able to communicate to those families, they know those families, and for us to work together on a communication strategy. So they have their communication people working with our communication people, so when we're sending those messages out. But we have to just do more of that. I agree. But it is frustrating. I know it's frustrating. They're sending, some people are, and it's unacceptable, and we've said that, and we're just working on improving our communications channels, because our supervisors who normally answer the calls too, they're driving. So we have our supervisors that are driving, calls are being backlogged, and we understand our parents are frustrated. And with this Alpha route, does not allow us to do a building by building fix. So in the past, the principals could go in and make adjustments, or Dr. Klein in her office could make some adjustments. This particular routing does not allow us to do that customization. And so that is the piece that we were able to do with the Versatron, but we're not able to do with Alpha Route.
Thank you. And with respect to the communications, district-wide call center, or whichever direction we end up, I think it's one of the areas that I think Carol touched on, and that is, resources do you need? What outside expertise? There must be people, not in the school business, not necessarily in the transportation business, but understand this whole communications kind of issue and maybe be able to help us solve it.
Right.
And then finally, the only other point, as I hear lots of different suggestions from across the table, it reminds me of, none of us are transportation experts or communications experts. And to me, it reminds me of what the job of a school board member is, as I've always understood it, which is, we give a direction. We want all kids to get good quality transportation on time, and we have to provide resources to all of you. And then part of our job is to get out of the way. And we have to balance, obviously. Some suggestions are worth thinking about. Some may not be. But, you're the administrative people on the job that need to accomplish these directions that we give you. And we're at fault if we don't provide you the resources to be able to get there.
Thank you. And, to the board's credit, you did give us the opportunity to explore and look for a different software. It just didn't work for our district. And so now, I know the board is more involved now because it has not worked. Families are affected, students are affected, and the board is asking questions because you're looking for those solutions. So yes, the board has provided us the opportunity to provide more resources. This one, and we did work with other departments at this, at the particular platform. We did, explored other school districts. We really thought at the time that this new routing with the new strategy of opting in would work because we knew that we were going to have some driver shortages, and we really wanted to have a strategy that will allow us to route kids across not just Columbus City schools, but all the kids in the city of Columbus more efficiently and more effectively, because we knew we had driver shortages last year. So we really thought that this would work. So you have provided those resources. Now you have provided more resources, and I misspoke. It is going to be on the next board agenda. It's not on tonight, so I apologize. We misspoke. It's on the next one. You are providing us the opportunity to fix it and fix it as soon as possible. And we're working to that end to get it done. And we're the communication strategy as we work with ODE, CNPs, to make sure that we're communicating effectively. Last year, remember, our parents could actually get the information via text message. Remember that? And so that is not, parents can't access that, but we had a more efficient process last year, and we just didn't. The current Alpha routing system is not allowing us to be as innovative as we thought, and I've stated before, we've asked the parents for grace, but we've also apologized because we did not do a good job. We have we failed our parents and our students with this choice, but we're doing everything we can to make it right. We have reached out to make sure we get more drivers, because yes, we have a driver shortage, but we do not have the right software that works for our organization. So it's two parts to that.
And let me just add, one of the things that I think we need to do as board members is provide our administration the room to try things,
yes,
knowing
yes,
that
yes,
they may not always be successful,
and
not
yes,
to be able to have to come back and
yeah,
say you goofed, you screwed up.
yeah.
It's not about that.
Agreed. Yes, absolutely.
We want to make sure that
right,
you've got that room to try out ideas.
And you have, the board has. I mean, you've given us time to work it out from the very beginning. I think it was stated earlier when we had our that fair, we began to hear from families then as we were getting closer to school about transportation. I think the board has been collaborative and allowed us to have much flexibility to try some new things.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Board Member Vera.
Thank you, President Adair. So just really quick, to add to kind of the topic we were just talking about with the texting. Even as we're looking at the call center strategy, a lot of companies now have the text messaging capability, the software where parents could just shoot a text, get a text back, and if it's a more detailed conversation, a phone call could be made. And so as we're looking at newer ways of how communication works presently, is that something we are also considering as part of our kind of increase to being able to have texting capability again?
At this point, everything's on the table. We're going to look at everything possible. We've learned a lot from this, which is, I guess, is a positive. The things that we've learned that don't work and the things that we know we need to have, and be more innovative in trying to figure out better ways to communicate. That's one of the biggest things. And providing our staff with the tools to be able to communicate, because that's what we've learned is if we don't have the tools to communicate, we're going back to the old-fashioned way with the phone and the emails, and that may not be sufficient enough to meet the needs of what our parents want. So we'll put everything on the table, and we'll look at this with eyes wide open to see what's best and see what kind of things are out there.
Thank you for that. And one other question, Dr. James, earlier you mentioned, potential partnerships or opportunities within our veterans. I guess my question is regards to our military reserves, National Guard, things of that nature. Would we at some point, if we're continuing to be in this situation, is this not a state of emergency? Like we can't get our kids to school. Like is that allowed? Is that something we could do? I guess when you mentioned the veterans, I said, well, what about the people who are still serving? Is there a connection there?
Yeah, last year I reached out to my contact in the governor's office about that, having National Guard or reservists come in, and I didn't get a response back from that. I brought that up today at our meeting with the Ohio Department of Education as well. We had National Guard members serving at food banks across the state, giving out food. So I know they can be deployed for other missions. And I thought, not necessarily a permanent solution, but a temporary solution just to increase the number of drivers.
Okay, so that is an option. Thank you for that. And I also just want to echo my sentiments, or the same sentiments of my colleagues. We thank you. We thank your bus drivers, your routers. We know that you all are working really hard, and I just want to be able to just say thank you personally and to let all of our drivers know, everyone who's even just doing extra, that we're all doing it for our kids because we need our kids in school and we need them, to get there. So we just want to let you know that we're asking these questions not to be divisive, but more of like, how can we help you figure it out? And so I just want to thank you and your team and everyone who's just working so hard to figure it out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Pierce promises she's got one last question.
One last question, and this is a request to our board president, Adair. Is it possible that we as a board can explore ways that we can provide administration with resources to hire seniors that are going to graduate this year? So I don't know what board committee this could potentially fall under, accounting and audit and accountability, finance, but that we could explore, because we have some shortages with drivers, with communications, with our instructional assistants. How can we give our administration resources that say by January, February, they can say, here's how many positions we have for graduating seniors, and we can support those seniors with the job as soon as graduation happens?
That'd be part of the career tech.
Yeah. Okay. Like that.
Can we do that?
Can I add one thing to that?
I don't know. I think I pulled all my good graces with that request.
That will work for every avenue except for CDL.
Yes.
Okay.
We can give you some call center people. We can't give you drivers, but call center.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. I want to kind of lean in on, before you sit down, one thing about, this idea about messing up, right? If this is a big inconvenience, and I think that we did not do it in a way, all the ways, but there's a lot going on. We had a lot of things that were new at once,
We didn't think it out quite right. But, we are an education institution. We do have to continue learning. We have to push innovation. We have to do this for our kids. And so I think having open, transparent dialogue about what happened, how we're going to fix it, how we're going to move forward, lessons learned is all extremely important. So again, thank you to you and your team. This sucks. And I know that you are going to not have a wellness week because you're going to be rooting and all the way up through, the holidays. And so any support we can give this team of board members, I think would be appreciated, as well as our drivers who are picking up the extra routes, and our families who are experiencing this as well. So, thank you very much. And as you sit down, I just want to ask the administration to take a deeper look at those root causes. I think part of the problem might be in the contracting that Dr. Pierce brought up. Some of the things that they need were not in that initial RFP. So, it comes back to the initial ask, and that wasn't, he didn't do that. That was somebody else.
Right.
So, maybe there's even some things we can look at in the procurement process itself, from the beginning. So there's a lot at play here in the systems that kind of did not align correctly. So.
Great. Okay.
I'm going to thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Superintendent, do you have anything else in your report?
No, but I was going to say that that yes, we would start updating those in our other reports, but one of the reasons we wanted to bring it forth because we know it was a big issue. We wanted to talk about it openly and get these ideas and thoughts out as people watched and listened, because it is, to your point, it's critical, it's mission critical, and we wanted to make sure that we're talking about it openly and honestly. So yes, but that ends our my report.
Thank you. Board members, I'm going to ask if you have any objections to moving item 26.1, which is public speakers on non-agenda items. Our speaker this evening is actually here to talk about transportation, and so I thought it would be a good opportunity, at Board Member Brown's request, to move the speaker up right now, just so that her comments are fresh with the comments we just, the presentation we just had. If there are no objections, I will go ahead and ask Laura Camara, and please correct me if I said that wrong, to come up to the podium, and we will go ahead and do the public comment, which was item 26.1. I'll come up to the podium. The topic is transportation. The board action is fix my son's special ed transportation, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you very much, and it's Laura Bruner Camara, but thank you very much. It's that Ohio thing. Thank you very much to the board for hearing me out this evening, and Superintendent, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about what's going on. My son's name is Seiduba Camara. We live in the 5th Avenue, 5th by Northwest area. We are the small cutout for City of Columbus in between Grandview Heights and Upper Arlington, where we live literally a block away from Grandview Heights High School and cannot go to school in Grandview. We are in Columbus District. My son, we started to notice at age 2.5 some red flags for developmental delays. We contacted Ohio Early Intervention, which was hard to do because the phone number was not working during COVID, and this was June of 2020. I finally got a hold of them June of 2020, and he got services for the month of July and August, so that is 2 sessions. And then he aged out at age 3 in September. On his 3rd birthday, they put him into Columbus City Schools at age 3. That is a problem that you could probably address, as I think that is a bit too young to age into the school system. But regardless, they put him into the half-day program 5 days a week. At that time, we were virtual. Then we got notice February of, this is the 2020-2021 school year, that we would be going hybrid in person February 1st. At that point, I was working for the Franklin County Municipal Court as a judicial administrative assistant. Our hours are 8 to 5. School for him was 9 to 11. So I did have him in a daycare, and I was waiting to hear from the principal as to whether we were going to be getting that busing. I didn't hear until about the week before school was supposed to convene that Form 1 has been canceled. So at that point, I started to try to dig around to see who I could talk to. Couldn't get anyone on the phone. I actually did get a call back from Stephen McElroy, and his response to me, he spoke to me for a long time, and his response to me essentially was, we have to prioritize which children get to school. And that was the exact wording that he used with me. And the emphasis was on middle school and high school students to keep them off the streets and to keep crime down, and essentially that my son is pre-K. So that is the answer I got for that school year. I let it go. The next school year rolled around, and the 2021-22, there was a public forum for parents, and I asked about the transportation, and I said in the chat, my son needs Form 1 busing. He was denied transportation all year last year. Will he be getting that this year? They waited a few minutes, answered back, Form 1 will not be continued at this time, and then turned off my ability to chat for the rest of the forum. So I was no longer allowed to ask any more questions. So I ended up having such a hard time working this out with my job, where I was going to work at 7, having my husband drop him off to me at 8, then having to go down to the school. I ended up having to leave my job.
Yeah, we're actually out of time, but I'm going to give you a little bit more time, okay?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was 3 minutes. Okay, I'll make it quick. I ended up having to leave my job because I just could not get him to and from school without possibly taking FMLA and getting unpaid leave to take my child to school where he gets early intervention therapies. So this year we were told we got busing, and told it was going to be Buckeye transportation. Then I called Buckeye and they said there's no contract, so I made several calls to the school district. I'm rushing now, and one of which I got contacted to the switchboard, and one of the people talking customer relations on the switchboard said, ma'am, I can understand times are tough, why you be upset. There's probably some problems going on at home as to why you are so upset, insinuating that we have a broken home and that is why I'm so angry. And I wasn't yelling, I was just crying. This is my 3rd year that I've been trying to get transportation for my son. We have had UTS. UTS has consistently not showed up. I do not think that further van transport is a solution, because there was no working number for the first 2 weeks of school for the Columbus office. When you do get someone on the phone, you don't get an answer. I have stood outside the last 3 or 4 days outside my house for 20 minutes every single day, with a woman in the office telling me that the driver came and you weren't there. And so it's just a matter of who you choose for this. It really does matter. Partnering with other people in the community, my question to you is, are you vetting those drivers? My son has special needs. He is autistic level 3. He has a diagnosis of autism level 3. One of the things that is very important with students is consistency, and he has meltdowns if there is not consistency, to the point where he harms himself, and he smacks himself until he's bruised. And just missing the school bus can be that. And I'm sorry for being emotional, but it's something that
I know, and
is very, yes.
It is.
So I can stop if you need me to.
I just, yeah, and I think maybe thank you for sharing all of that with us. We typically do not comment back to the public commenters, but
sure.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it just highlights a lot of our current discussion. And I would like for a member of our administrative team to come and talk with you, because I feel like you have more to say. But your time is up, and I did give you extra time.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming and advocating on behalf of your student.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go back into the agenda and talk to our internal auditor. Hi, Auditor Smith.
Good afternoon. I do not have a report for you all this evening.
Thank you. And to our treasurer. Good evening, Mr. Treasurer.
Good evening. No report. Just a reminder, we have a Finance and Appropriations Committee meeting coming up next Wednesday. This is, well, a week from Wednesday. Right here, 4 o'clock. Big topic will be this will be the presentation of the November 5-year forecast.
Riveting.
Riveting will be one word you'll use for this, as we've got it prepared and we're beginning to discuss it internally.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move to Board Matters, Item 7. Our first Board Matter is 7.1, Resolution Accepting the Transfer of Territory from the Dublin City School District, Franklin, Delaware, and Union Counties, Ohio, and authorizing and approving related matters. Before we begin with the motion, I'm going to have our treasurer just say a few words to remind us about what this is.
Sure. Back in June of 2016, the board entered into an agreement with Dublin City Schools for Dublin to exit the win-win agreement. One of the provisions there was that after several years, Columbus Schools, would have the option of either receiving one final win-win payment from them, about $1.1 million, or the transfer of land known as the Don Scott territory, primarily comprised of where the Don Scott Airfield is out there on Case Road. It's a fairly large tract of property bordered on the north by 161, the west by Sawmill, the south by Case, and the east side abuts some other properties that run out to go down, but that we already have in the district as well. So it's a fairly large tract of land. In May of 2021, we got to the point where we had to choose, and so we opted, it was our recommendation to the board, and the board concurred. We opted to take the land instead of the $1.1 million as a one-time payment. We felt that was a long-term, better solution, better investment. Kind of land is king as far as I'm concerned, even though it is all currently OSU property and tax exempt. Subsequent to that, Dublin did their job. They had to take several steps, get some information and documentation to the Ohio Department of Education. And June of 22, June 14th of 22, ODE approved that transfer. The last step in this is for you then to adopt this resolution and that you'll accept that transfer of that property, and then we'll execute that with the county auditor and make sure that that transfer happens on the property records. So that's the purpose behind this, and it will conclude that last step in Dublin's exit of the win-win agreement.
Thank you. Board Member Vera has the motion.
I move to adopt the resolution accepting the transfer of territory from the Dublin City School District, Franklin, Delaware, and Union Counties, Ohio, and authorizing and approving related matters.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes momentarily stepped away. Ms. Vera?
Yes.
And President Adair?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 7.2, resolution to oppose the State Board of Education resolution to support parents, schools, and districts in rejecting harmful, coercive, and burdensome gender identity policies. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Board Member Brown.
Thank you. This resolution that we're going to consider and hopefully pass is to oppose the State Board of Education's resolution, which calls itself a resolution to support parents, schools, and districts in rejecting harmful, coercive, and burdensome gender identity policies. However, just at a glance and looking through this, what this is a resolution to support state-sponsored discrimination. It's horrendous, I think. The state school board member that offered this, Brendan Shea, did modify it slightly to make it even worse. It is ugly and offensive. And what this is, in part, is a reaction to what the federal administration is doing to try to move regulations back to be supportive of Title IX, which has worked for us for many, many decades. This resolution from Board Member Shea spreads harmful rhetoric, and our position, I think, as we've said over many years in this district, we believe that creating the leaders of tomorrow requires an understanding of the diversity, equity, and inclusion that all students must feel safe, welcome, and respected. With that, and also to let you know that I will be testifying to the State Board of Education on October 12th at 8 a.m. It's a Wednesday, and presenting our position to the State Board. I hope that it can help make a difference. And I would say that Honesty for Ohio Education is also doing lots of work around the state on this. So with that, I move to adopt the resolution, to oppose the State Board resolution, and to adopt the policy as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Board Member Beckerly.
Just to thank you. Thank you for doing the testifying and taking the lead on this.
Board Member Cole.
Just very quickly, thank you for stepping up. Thank you for presenting this to us. This is a matter of human dignity. It really is. It's just a matter of making sure that we have laws and policy in place that acknowledge human dignity. So thank you for that. I'm happy to defend it.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes, because hate has no place in our district.
And Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Brown, for testifying on behalf of our Board of Education to the State Board. And thank you, board members, all for supporting this resolution as well as our joint statement. And we will continue to do advocacy at our State School Board Association as well over the course of this year. I think it looks like a longer-term issue that we are going to have to address, and so we will continue to do that.
Numerous proposals in the legislature as well as at the State Board of Education. And this is going to be constant work for quite some time, unfortunately, just to protect all of our students and our staff and treating people well. This is basic stuff. And I told you last time when we talked and I introduced it that this one really made me angry. And that doesn't happen to me very often. And it's still there.
All right, thank you. We're going to move into item 7.3, discussion on board engagement. This is just an update on where we are in our engagement efforts. I'm anticipating just a quick update from Dr. Pierce, and then there was a pop-up engagement. So turn it over to Board Member Beckerly and Vera.
So in terms of updates, that doodle poll has been sent out with a range of times and dates for board members to share when they are available. That doodle poll also kind of gave us some language to put around the purpose of this engagement and our goal. And so I encourage all board members to go into the system, complete that doodle poll, share your availability so we can start to again, nail down dates to engage our community and to determine specific locations.
Thank you. Board Member Beckerly and Vera.
We had a really amazing time Saturday. Like, the rain held off. It was the band invitational. Is that what? Yes. Amazing events just to be able to see our kids out on that field and to be able to engage with parents and community partners and And that's what we really want this opportunity to be, an opportunity for us as, their elected officials to be present and have that time with them. And so we just saw an opportunity to support what our district was already doing, what our kids were already doing. So we wanted to be there to support them first and foremost. But then certainly being able just to touch base with parents if there were questions. Dr. Dixon was there as well, and so it was an amazing opportunity to see our young people. And I mean, I'm very impressed with our band. I mean, there was so many different. I mean, it got real at the end where they did like almost like a battle, like a. I mean, I'm just so impressed with our high school teams and the spirit everyone had that day. And so we are looking forward to more intentional, authentic engagement opportunities with our community and our families.
And I just want to thank Board Member Vera because it was kind of her brainchild, which is that, in addition to the engagement that Dr. Pierce is heading up, that we look for opportunities, and we're calling it kind of, euphemistically pop-up engagement, but we're going to continue to do that because there were genuine communications. It was parents, there were some partners there that we got to talk to, and it's a, we want to have comprehensive, systematic engagement on a lot of fronts, but I think this was a nice opportunity to, in the meantime, look for these opportunities that are a little more informal but still meaningful. And I want to thank our board liaison and government affairs guru, Misty, for getting us all set up in the 11th hour. She just pivoted and showed up, and we'll get that down so that maybe we don't need so much support. But let's keep looking for opportunities and stay tuned.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from board members on that engagement? All right, let's go ahead and move into item 8, notice of public hearing on reemployment of retired employees. As you know, this just requires me to read the public notices. There are 2. 8.1, notice of public hearing on reemployment of retired employee Paul T. Lausch. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 3309.345, the Columbus Board of Education gives notice that Paul T. Lausch, teacher who retired from the Columbus City Schools effective May 31st, 2013, is seeking employment with the Columbus City Schools as a teacher effective December 5th, 2022. The board will hold a public hearing on December 6th, 2022 at 5:30 in the boardroom at 3700 South High, Columbus, Ohio, on the issue of Mr. Lausch's reemployment. Item 8.2, notice of public hearing on reemployment of retired employee Wilthenia S. Moore Williams. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 33.09.345, the Columbus Board of Education gives notice that Wilthenia S. Moore Williams, teacher who retired from the Columbus City Schools effective May 29, 2015, is seeking employment with the Columbus City Schools as a teacher effective December 5, 2022. The board will hold a public hearing on December 6, 2022 at 5:30 in the boardroom at 3700 South High, Columbus, Ohio, on the issue of Ms. Moore Williams' reemployment. All right, and item 9 is our consent agenda. This evening, our consent agenda consists of items 10.1 to 25.3. Are there any items a board member would like to pull for separate consideration? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Are there any items a board member would like to discuss? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
With the exception of 13.6, which I am abstaining, yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes, with the exception of 13.3, which I am also abstaining.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. And we readjusted our agenda, so the next item is item 27, which is our executive session. Vice President Reyes, you have the motion.
Thank you, President Adair. I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session per Section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees.
Been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Lots of seconds. Please call the roll.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. We will now recess into executive session. We will come back to this room to officially adjourn our meeting, but that will not be televised. So thank you to the staff and everyone who joined us this evening, and have a great evening.